Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was youngest Prince of Wakanda? Huge shout out to KukanKing for this story. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. It has been a long 9 years, a young child thought to himself as he lay on the roof, partaking in his favorite thing to do to pass the time, since he was forbidden from training today. As he raised his hands to the dark sky and noted his complexion was no longer that of tanned skin, as he did previously. Now he had more of darker skin, along with much more curly hair, black hair, instead of his former spiky blonde hair. All in all, he looked closer to the Gondai Marikage Dairy in his last life minus the white hair. I guess karma owed one for my previous childhood, the young boy thought back to a time in his previous life before he was a shinobi. From a clanless orphan to the prince of a nation, the boy muttered as he closed his fist and held it in the air, giving the impression that he was holding the star he was focusing on within the palm of his hand. Ahem, an older voice coughed from behind where the boy lay. The younger of the two smiled as he recognized the voice, just tilted his head back some more, till he was looking at his owner of the cough. "Brother, you always were the best at finding me. Well, you don't make it easy now, do you?" The older boy said as he looked around the rooftop before his eyes found his younger brother's gaze. "Come along now, Baba has requested our presence in the hall. You know I hate these things." "Yeah, well, take it up with Mama and Shuri." Fine, meet you down there. Just be safe, you know both Mother and Baba worry when you pull your stunts." "Alright, thanks, Chala, see you in a bit, say hi to Aurora for me," the young boy said before kipping up from one hand and backflipping off of the edge. "That boy is going to be the death of us all," Chala the teen crown prince muttered to himself as he watched his baby brother, who appeared to have abnormally high control over his body, often appearing to be very limber and acrobatic, always climbing things and scaring our parents. But while the crown prince was distracted, he missed disturbance in the air, and even the star in the distance appeared to flicker. It was so faint that even if you were paying attention you could have missed it. Wakanda Royal Palace. Grand Hall. Around half an hour had passed before Nizari found himself dressed in a bright orange dashiki with purple highlights, along with matching bottoms. He was standing off to the side watching the proceedings quietly along his twin, as they stood in between two Dora Milaje. "What is bothering you, sis?" the former shinobi asked as he glanced over at his father and mother, spoke and mingled with their noble guests. "Nothing. Come on, Shuri, you know you can tell me. You were late." "Ah, you're right, my apologies, baby sister. A cub crossed my path, so I had to take the long way around." Nizari teased before smirking at the frown, turning into a pout on his sister's face. Shuri was about to respond before their father spoke up. "We are here to celebrate the coming season." King Chaka spoke up from his throne, his voice demanding respect, causing the room to quiet as their leader spoke, as he directed all of the attention to the entry point of the throne room. King Chaka nodded towards the Dora Milaje as they signaled for the twins to stand beside their father. Shuri and Nizari nodded as they walked into the middle of the room to stand beside their brother, mother and father. "Dear friends and family, honored council member, we are here to celebrate their 9th summer, the first set of twins to grace our bloodline. Shuri and Nizari." The king spoke with a fatherly kindness as he pointed towards his youngest children, signaling them over. Before any more words could be spoken, an explosion in the distance went off, the force sending shockwaves throughout the grand hall, before they were absorbed by the vibranium in the walls. Nizari ran towards the balcony along with other people as they looked towards the source of the explosion. "That was from Impel Down." "Yeah, father turned into a prison to hold the most dangerous criminals in Wakanda," King Chaka said simply before he looked towards his general and wife. "Go and take a few of your finest to secure Impel Down and find the cause of this." The queen nodded before looking towards her children, before heading towards the exit of the room, flanked by half a dozen Dora Milaje. "I got to help," Nizari thought as he looked on towards the fires. Nizari looked towards the adults all talking about what is going on and locked eyes briefly with his mother before he felt a new sensation. What the hell, Nizari thought as he felt a pulling sensation in his gut. The world around seemed to spin before darkness. Wakanda Impel Down. As the world around the young prince stopped spinning, the former shinobi tried to beepize his surroundings. "Alright, I ain't in the grand hall anymore." That felt like a shunshin. "Hold that thought," the prince thought as he rushed over to the nearest tree and hurled. As the young prince finished throwing up his stomach contents, he looked up as the smell of burning invaded his senses. "Focus now, figure whatever that was later." Nizari thought as he followed the scent of burning out of the tree line he had found himself in. The dark was illuminated by flame and smoke. That was the first thing Nizari thought as he arrived at the smoldering ruins of Impel Down. The former fort-turned-prison was now nothing but ash, rock and a large amount of human bodies, some corpses, some alive, it was hard to tell. "Shit," the young prince cursed as he spotted a woman was pinned under some rubble. Nazari sprinted over to the woman, and as he reached her, he could see she just lost consciousness as he arrived. "Shit, come on," the prince muttered as he leaned over her to check her pulse. After a few moments, he felt it. It was weak but strong enough for Nazari to allow a breath to escape his form. "Now to get rid of this thing," the prince muttered as he placed both hands underneath a large chunk of rubble that was keeping the woman pinned. Growling as he attempted to lift or at least make the piece of wall shift slightly to a point where he could pull her out from her current position. Come on, damn it. I could use some help here." Nazari shouted and raged against the debris, but even as he was unable to make it budge an inch, his muscles budged as he gave it everything he had, all the while calling for help. "My prince, what is going on?" The formerly unconscious woman spoke up from beneath him as she recognized the young prince from her service as a former member of the Dora Milaje. "Quiet you and save your strength." Nazari snapped at the woman beneath him. "I will get you out of here. Please, my prince, you don't understand, you're in danger, this wasn't an accident. A problem for another time. My only concern is getting you out." The prince paused as he looked down at the woman. "My prince, please, you must leave. My name is Naki, I was in the Dora Milaje when you were even younger." "Well, Naki, I will get you out of here, and that is a promise of a lifetime." "I don't care if I don't have chakra anymore," Nazari thought to himself as he knew that if he had his old abilities, this wouldn't have been a problem. The child prince could feel his muscles burning, and in a moment of desperation he heard a voice. "Give up." The voice whispered, barely audible. What was that? The young prince thought in response. "You should give up, you're not him, not anymore." The voice spoke up at a louder volume. "I may look different, I may sound different, the mentality is still the same." The former shinobi acknowledged. A familiar feeling began to occur once more as the mysterious boomed once more. "You're weak. You have no chakra. What can you even do?" "Chakra didn't define me. It was my choice. My will to press forward." Nazari responded out loud, startling the pinned woman who was watching with widened eyes as her young prince was trying his damned hardest to save her. She watched on in awe as it appeared that the very air around her prince began to distort. "You're only human, nothing more, nothing less. A child, a weakling, a mistake, an abomination." "Yeah, I'm only human, but that ain't a problem, my soul still burns just as brightly in this life as it had in my last." Nazari responded to the voice with even more strain as the felt weight of the debris, along with the odd feeling had felt back at the Grand Hall. "Raya!" The prince roared as the chunk of concrete and vibranium shattered and was blown away into the sky. The sudden lack of resistance made the youngest prince of Wakanda fall forward, over the woman and into the mud-covered ground. The now freed woman's eyes widened in response to the youngest member of the royal family, displaying some kind of ability. As she looked over his form, she took note that he had fallen to his knees, his arms were still extended fully, but instead of pushing against a slab of debris, now holding him up from face planting into the mud. His 9-year-old body was shaking from the tension. His nose was bleeding, sweat dripping from his entire body, and his form was quivering from the strain of what had just happened. Luckily, the former Dora Milaje had forgotten about what the young prince had been mumbling to himself after that display of power, and with her current pain level, she didn't even give it a second thought. "Wait, are those footsteps?" The woman thought to herself as she tried to call out for help, but only a whisper came out. With any luck, it's someone looking for the prince. That thought of optimism died when she saw who came out the bushes. She heard the footsteps coming from several Caucasian men dressed as if they were on an African safari. As soon as they spotted her, they all trailed their guns on her. She had glanced behind her towards the young prince who still hadn't moved from his position. "Looks like those vibranium mining charges really did a number on that prison," one of the men bragged. "And I can't feel my legs. Shit, well, I can only hope that they missed the prince," she thought as she glared defiantly at the former prisoners. The apparent leader of this group of outsiders walked up to the downed prison guard. "Well, it's been fun, but the boss will be taking that vibranium now, and you can just die like the bitch you are." The leader of this band spoke up as he drew his pistol and aimed it at the downed woman's forehead. "To be killed by that thief of all people, pathetic. I'm sorry, Wakabi, please may you grow strong like your father. Filthy animal, this is for the brand." Bang. Smoke from the pistol wafted in the air as all the people in the present area stood completely shocked at the scene before them. The bullet that was fired had stopped moving. It had left the firearm, and out of nowhere a small child stood, which none of the former prisoners noticed before, just appeared between the crippled guard and the gun-wielding former prisoner. "You did this?" It wasn't a question. It came out of the young prince's mouth in a whisper, but the tone, the cold tone, shook these hardened killers to the core. "All of this death, and for what? Some vibranium?" The prince raised both of his hands as he let his instincts guide him. His dark brown eyes seemingly began to burn a molten amber as the gut-pulling sensation was back, but no longer uncomfortable. It felt almost like a natural extension of oneself. Begone from my sight and may you not return in the next life, Nazari spoke in a tone that showed a wisdom beyond his years alive should allow, and a rage that one only seen in those who know the horrors of war. Before the other thieves could even pull the triggers on their weapons, to them, their collective worlds exploded in a flash of light before darkness took them. Tanaki, the view before her, left her gobsmacked. The armed criminals were suddenly thrown backwards, and then the world shook, and then the forest behind them was also completely destroyed. Exhaustion and her injuries finally took their toll as she lost consciousness once more. The Nazari, as he raised both of his hands, there appeared to be a red spark of electricity before a wave of crimson-colored energy surged from his form. With all power and no control, the criminals were hit full force, and those murders were turned to paste before they even left the ground. The ground cracked, trees bent and broke underneath his new power. The prince stood there with tears welling up in his eyes as he thought about the people, his people who had died at the hands of these criminals. After a few moments, light shone down from the sky signaling to the prince that they had been found. Mother, finally. He thought as a small smile to grace his features as he let the tears flow. The young prince's eyes rolled backwards as he fell backwards, missing the cry of his mother shouting his name. What the current prince did not realize was that tapping into his latent ability has drawn the attention of several parties. USA. Westchester, New York. The wheelchair-bound man was currently sitting in his mansion's basement searching the United States for any emerging mutants when an enormous signature appeared on the system. The raw power could be felt halfway across the world. Like a moth to a flame, the man focused on this new signature and found a powerful mutant signature in the heart of the African nation of Wakanda. Such power, as he liked Gene. United Kingdom. Muir Island. The young teen could be found snickering to himself, all the while tears flowed from his eyes down his face. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. The teen snapped at seemingly no one. They are a threat to us, they must die. All of the voices and heads in unison cried out. Shut up. The teen hollered back before emphasizing his point by ramming his head into a wall repeatedly hard enough to break the skin. Gas started to flow into the room he was occupying and a small smile came over his face. As his consciousness began to leave him, he looked towards the camera monitoring him. Finally, some quiet. The teen whispered as he slumped over. Savage Lands. Alarms were blaring within a floating pyramid-like structure, disturbing two beings' discussion. The larger of the two focused on a point of the room he had felt the disturbance. Rushing into the room the meeting was being held, 4 small humanoids came to a stop in front of the largest person in the room. My lord, are we being invaded? One of the 4 spoke up. No, I don't believe we are being invaded. A deep voice announced as he stepped into the light revealing his form. Then why the alarms, Lord Apocalypse? The powerful mutant is just awoken. Apocalypse said before pausing and looking towards his ally, who had already made his way to the main computer to study what set off the alarm. Any news, Sinister? 1 second, almost got it, Sinister responded just before bringing up onto the main monitor, right before the alarms were set off. All eyes turned to the screen and witnessed a young child appear inside their base for half a second before vanishing. The very powerful mutant has been born, I believe. Sinister, you will find out where and who this child is. Yes, my lord. Austria. Salzburg. The woman who was walking home from the local supermarket as she arrived at her front door heard a scream from inside the small 2-bedroom flat. Dropping the full shopping bags, she booted the front door down and in her panic, lost control of her transformation. Milky white skin turned almost scaly blue. Brunette hair and blue eyes became red and yellow. The woman, now in her true form, ran into the living room where she found her friend on her knees with eyes rolling into the back of her head. Irene. The blue-skinned Reed shouted as she slid into the living room, grabbing a hold of her friend by the shoulders to try and snap her out of her episode. 4 people stood on what appeared to be a wasteland littered with destroyed metallic shells and various humanoid corpses. The 4 stood together wielding powers at an almost godlike level of control. Reality itself was bent and warped to one's will, space was torn asunder by the will of another. Cosmic flames sprung forth the back of another, spreading across the ground and devouring all it touched, oceans boiling and thunderstorms and hurricanes that shall leave naught in their wake. When motion decays, every being in that world shall know death. The 4 sovereigns will hold dominion over the foundations of the universe. What kind of vision are you having, Irene? Her friend questioned. Through trials of blood and fire, they shall be forged from Homo Superior to Homo Supreme. What the hell? Her friend muttered in fear of the last line as Irene's blind eyes rolled forward back to normal before collapsing in a heap. They shall rise together, through their power they must unite us, through them we gain the power to stand, for if we are divided, we shall fall. Well shit. Wakanda. Burn-ins on a hospital royal suite. Drip drip drip. What is that noise and why won't it let me sleep for Bast's sake? Nazari thought to himself as he began to open his eyes, only to notice something was off. The sky as far as the eye could see littered with shining stars shimmering and burning with brightness that seemed almost unnatural, no sense of civilization, for as far as eyes could see. Did I die again? The former shinobi thought as he tried to remember anything before he awoke in this place. The current prince cautiously felt for his limbs and other extremities, making sure he could move and feel everything from his arms to his toes as he swung his legs off of the bed. So not dead, then I can feel the soil between my feet, the prince spoke aloud as he glanced over to a large tree that seemed to have several large black panthers lounging around glancing towards him. As the prince rose from his bed, he stretched his limbs to a point where he felt multiple relieved pops. Spotting a mountain in the far distance, his eyes lingered a moment longer before scanning the rest of his surroundings, noting that the purple-tinted sky looked incredibly like the Wakandan ancestral plane he was told as a child. The prince's vision ends on a tree in the distance. His brain tried to tell his body that he should fear these predators, his logic and reason told him he should run or cower at their sheer power, before realization set in and the former shinobi caught on. This is the ancestral plane, so either I'm dead or I ate the herb. But why would I? What happened? Nazari thought to himself as he noted a panther leap from the tree in the distance into the waist-high grass. Shit, this is so troublesome, the former shinobi coined a common phrase from his previous right hand and his successor. A few more moments passed and the grass at the edge of the clearing the panther's fur began to shift, the night sky-colored fur began to drain away like rain washing away undried paint, till all that was left was a black panther with white fur and purple eyes. It's getting bigger, Nazari thought as he took a familiar stance just in case of an attack, as the panther now stood at the size of a small elephant. The large beast stopped short 2 feet in front of the prince and looked down upon the small child. The child of prophecy, an ancient voice bore its way into the prince's head. What the funk is going on, the prince thought as his eyes widened at hearing that old title. I wonder, with your power and my blessing will you become the exalted one, the being who stands above all else throughout the heavens and upon the earth. What? Nazari spoke up, starting to get used to a new voice in his head. Is it me or does he look kinda smug? Begin and awaken, young mutant, the panther roared. What did he just call me? Nazari's eyes widened as he was blasted away from the ancestral plane. Wakanda. Burnins on a hospital royal suite, actually. GHHH. Nazari shot up from a cot of some kind covered in dirt and earth. Brother, my son, little guy. 3 voices shouted in relief as 2 of those original shouters dozed onto the young man in an attempt to hold him tightly, but before they could reach, they were stopped in their tracks. I'm so kinda not sure what's going on. But I think I just visited the ancestral plane, what happened to the woman with me, and am I a mutant? Nazari spoke up, ignoring his sister and mother's concern, locking eyes with his father and firing off rapid-fire questions before taking a breath. Son, we have much to discuss, the king spoke up, his tone conveying the seriousness of the situation. Few hours later. It was late, but the young prince couldn't sleep, his mind restless from his spirit world trip to his discussion with his doctor, his discussion with his parents, what his sister did, Aurora missing and everything in between. Screw this, Nazari hopped out of his cot before heading towards the bathroom. As he entered, the irritable young man glanced around the bathroom, marveling at the sheer size of the room. I'm pretty sure this is an ensuite. How the funk is an ensuite bigger than my old home back in Konoha as a kid? The former shinobi quickly shook off his and quickly disrobed before hopping in the shower. As the running water began to fall and hit the top of the prince's head, memories began to flow. Flashback start. So, let me get this straight, I've been unconscious for 2 weeks, and during that time the prince's eye shifted to his twin who was looking in every other direction than his. Interesting, injected me with the heart-shaped herb mixture, which would explain the ancestral psychic trip and waking up covered in soil. Nazari took a breath as he glanced down at his arm and flexed his biceps. I do feel stronger than before, a lot stronger. We believe your powers left a unique and powerful strain on your mind, and the heart-shaped herb has allowed your body to process and heal any damage from your unique powers, the doctor spoke up after glancing at his chart. But I'm not the panther, that is, the old man is. Nazari stated, letting some of his old persona through. Well, I'm still the Black Panther, you are correct, the king said as he stepped forward. The heart-shaped herb has bonded with you at a molecular level and is resisting being flushed out of the system. The doctor spoke once more as a nurse just handed him a tablet. According to this, between yourself and the herb you were designed to sync with it perfectly. Whether this is your blood or powers we may never know. The youngest prince in the room shifted his body to cross his legs on the cot that he was on. I'm guessing training begins as soon as I'm out of here. Your training regime will be increased, you will be sparring with myself and the Dora Milaje, whilst also learning to harness this power. King Chaka spoke with an authority his youngest children were not used to seeing. I was planning on up my training anyway, Nazari muttered before his eyes began to flicker amber as he began to tap into his powers, so what else do you want to tell me? The young prince asked with a raised eyebrow. One got away, the criminal leader Claw. He kidnapped Ororo, and we lost track of them in the jungle by the river border. Chala clenched his jaw and tightened up his fist in anger as an angry scowl appeared on his face. Suddenly the room began to shake, a pressure fell upon all who were present. The Dora Milaje in the room, the doctors and the royal family looked towards the youngest prince. Breathe, just breathe, it's okay to breath, Shuri thought to herself as she was shaking and sweating as she stared into the molten amber light emitting from her twin's eyes. The room continued to shake and tremor before the former shinobi snapped out of his temper tantrum. Oh, emotional triggers, that's good to know, Nazari thought as he glanced across the room, everyone apart from his father in slouching positions, standing there with wide eyes and sweating buckets. I forgot myself, my apologies, when will the retrieval squad be returning, and whereabouts are they now? The young prince spoke coldly as his eyes dimmed but still maintained the molten amber look. The question was asked. My son, it has been 2 weeks, we have withdrawn our main retrieval parties, young Ororo and the criminal were tracked to a cliff that leads to a ravine deep within the jungle. The queen spoke up as she regained her posture. And the trail goes cold because that ravine has a unique natural forming set of tunnels that could lead anywhere. I know the history lesson. Nazari spoke up as he cracked his neck making an audible pop. I don't see why the squad gave up from there. The prince turned his narrowed gaze to the general and the remaining Dora Milaje. So Queen Ramonda went to speak before being cut off. Son. I called off the retrieval squad to aid in restoring security to the remaining escaped inmates of Impel Down. The king spoke with authority. No longer was he speaking to his son, but to his loyal subject. He stared down at his son, not appreciating the tone of voice that was coming out of his youngest son. The youngest person in the room matched his father's stare. Subconsciously it became a battle of wills, a panther king and a mere cub with the scent of destiny wafting off of its fur. This lasted a few seconds before the prince broke eye contact first. DCH, fine, I'll drop it for now, the prince thought to himself as there was much to do before he could go and find his friend himself. Flashback end. Reaching for the control panel, the reincarnated prince paused for just a second. I will find you and get you back home safely, Ororo, this I swear. Nazari thought as his hand swiped over the panel, turning the water off. After stepping out of the shower and now fully awakened after his time in the bathroom. It's not chakra, but whatever it is powerful, Nazari thought as he raised his arm and formed his hand into a familiar shape. Focusing on his palm, he noticed slight distortions in the air itself. Interesting, now what? The prince spoke aloud as he tried to move the distortions. At first, there was nothing, then came the ripples. The ripples began to twist and churn, sparks of blue energy began to spark, and with each twist, a blue bolt of energy lashed out with wild abandon. Focus. Nazari demanded of himself as distorted energy began lashing out with uncontrollable abandon. The bolt of energy lashed at the wall, in front of the prince. Oh no, you don't. The prince added his right hand on top of his left in a familiar position. His hand was slightly above the swirling energy in his palm, trying to force this wild power under his control, taking the fundamentals of the Rasengan. Rotation, Nazari spoke as he was remembering the steps for his signature attack. Now power. The young prince muttered with sweat dripping from his brow as he added power to mix, trying to mold what this energy was into an orb-like shape. The orb appeared to stabilize in the young prince's hand. By the ancestral plane, it worked. The young prince thought to himself as he stared at the orb in his palm as it began to glow brighter. Wait, you shouldn't be glowing, Nazari thought before his eyes widened. Oh, SH. Nazari shouted before the orb shone brightly before collapsing its shape and blasting deep into the room wall, heavily denting it before falling onto the floor below. Various hospital staff and Dora Milaje quickly burst through the suite door. Note to self, new powers are not chakra, got it? Nazari groaned to himself as he began picking himself up off the ground. By Prince. The captain of the Dora station to guard the youngest prince. Even with my enhanced physiology, I felt that. So that either means my durability was less than my old man's, or my potential attack power with my powers was just that high. I wonder which one. The prince kept mumbling as he stood up and began stretching his limbs. It wasn't until a few moments had passed before the youngest member of the royal house noted that his room had been filled with security, doctors and nurses. My bad, Captain, Nazari spoke as he smiled sheepishly before heading back towards the medical cot. I think we might need a lot more space tomorrow for training, he said with a small guilty grin that would give the impression that training may involve a lot of property damage. 5 years later. Sitting in a Wakandan stealth craft was the second son as he began running through a series of switches powering up the ship. Come on, Shuri, cover for me, I'll owe you one. I'll even bring you back a souvenir. Alright, fine, but I want a cool souvenir, and where are you going? But girl, collecting insurance just in case. Nazari thought as pride swelled up in his chest as Shinobi lesson number 13 was always covering your back. Ah, I see my lessons are starting to stick, baby sister. The prince teased and laughed. I'm heading to a genetics conference in America, New York. Shuri's eyes narrowed at the baby sister's comment before widening in slight fear at the sound of New York as she felt great worry for her twin. You know what the security reports say about the enhanced people and anti-mutant groups, the city is being invaded every other day. Shuri ranted off with worried undertone filling her voice. Don't worry baby sis, I am the strongest, Nazari smirked, leaned back in his chair and pointed at himself. And besides it is being hosted by Hank McCoy and Charles Xavier will be speaking. That explains it. Shuri muttered ever since we found out about his mutation, Nazari has dedicated his time outside of training to study and understand genetics. Thanks for the cover sister, I owe you one. Damn right, you do. Lowering the section 9 of the shield wall you got 15 seconds to get there. Shuri said before cutting the transmission. Alright let's go. The prince shouted as he raised the throttle and the stealth craft shot out from its bay. Cloaking device activated, the former shinobi thought to himself as his ship began to blend in with its surroundings as the prince piloted his way to his opening. It was late and the full moon was out and the Statue of Liberty could be seen in all of its glory. The cloudless night, great for sightseeing, terrible for stealth though, Nazari mumbled as he looked towards the tall cityscape. This is it, my first time outside of Wakanda. I got time to explore, the conference isn't until tomorrow, Nazari said as he began scanning below to find a safe space to land. So, this is New York, it's tall, I'll give it that. The undercover prince mumbled as he was flying over a large green area looking for a safe space to land. This will do nicely. Nazari thought as he turned the ship back around and prepared for a landing. After slipping into more locally appropriate clothing, donning an orange hoodie with black highlights, some black combat shorts and a pair of black boots. No labels, easier to blend in. Shinobi rule number 23, Nazari whispered as he packed a small pack with some supplies. Let's go exploring, time to see what all the fuss is about, I wonder if I can find some ramen. The boy, only biologically 14 years of age, was wandering through the streets after making it out of Central Park, which was bigger than it looked from his ship. I will say this, it doesn't smell like Wakanda, Nazari thought to himself as his nose wrinkled as he breathed in the New York air. Enhanced senses, sometimes you can go funk yourself like such BS, Nazari cursed slightly as he remembered how enhanced senses will be great for tracking and combat, could also be a major hindrance and weakness to exploit. The prince carried on walking with no actual destination in mind until a familiar scent crossed under his nose. Ramen? That's definitely ramen. Nazari thought as excitement flowed from the prince as he looked around at all of the vendors and shops. The designs of the shops all fit a similar theme. What in the world? Nazari looked around to see the area he was in was super busy and crowded. So many people all celebrating together, all ages, so many ethnicities. Nazari thought with a small smile on his face. It's Chinese New Year, a new voice spoke up from behind the young mutant. Huh? Nazari said as he turned around to face a girl similar in age to him with pink sunglasses, a pink t-shirt, some jeans and a yellow rainproof trench coat. It's Chinese New Year, you tourist. That obvious, huh? You tell me you are standing in the middle of the street gawking at everything. The prince smiled sheepishly as he subconsciously scratched the back of his head. I guess I am pretty obvious, I was just overwhelmed by the smell of food. What kind of food are you looking for? Ramen, Nazari spoke up in an instant, no time for hesitation. Slightly taken aback by how fast and seriousness of that statement, the young girl hesitated before responding. I know the best place to ramen in all of Chinatown. Well then, what are we waiting for? Nazari said in an excited tone before he reached out to the young girl and grabbed a hold of her wrist. By the way, what's your name? Oh right, my name is Jubalit. The young screamed out as he was suddenly being drugged around by some random kid she decided to help out as he looked quite lost. What was that? Nazari laughed as he glanced back as they were whipping through the almost endless crowds of people, dragging his new acquaintance around with him. Around 5 minutes passed before the orange and yellow blur came to a skidding halt. This the place? Nazari asked simply as he let go of the girl. The young girl, after catching her breath, looked up to see Inugashi's ramen in bright red colors. How did you know this was the spot? The young teen just smirked before raising his hand to his nose and pointing with his thumb. The nose. Sometimes enhanced senses are a beautiful thing, Nazari thought as he just followed his nose to best smelling ramen in the air and followed the scent. It's been 14 long years, Nazari whispered as began walking towards the store. Oh, he's just leaving me, the girl thought as she frowned at the boy's back, but just as he reached the door he paused, looking back towards her. You're coming, right? Jubilee. I got the show, what's the best ramen on the menu? Shit, what was his name again? The girl began to panic. The name's Nazari, in my excitement for ramen I forgot my manners, my apologies. Nazari introduced himself with a smile as she took in the boy's features. Jubilee thought as a warm blush came across her face. So, definitely not American, are ya? The girl mumbled as she had noticed a type of African accent, but she couldn't pinpoint it. I can tell you all about it over a bowl or two, Nazari said as the pair entered the restaurant together. Hey, old man. I'm bringing in a customer for ya, Jubilee shouted to the back as the pair sat down. Several hours had passed and there were 7 bowls of ramen between them. The tourist went through 5 bowls insanely fast, trying each special, but soon after that the ramen was forgotten and the two just sat there talking about each other. The young man had yet to reveal his top secrets, but they did talk about their favorite superheroes. So, her favorite hero is some kind of ghost spider. His favorite hero is a Black Panther, maybe they are some kind of African superhero. Hey, kids, you're gonna miss the fireworks if stay in here on your little date. The ramen chef called out from the back where he was washing the dishes and bowls. The actual New Yorker's eyes widened as she lost track of time she didn't even realize before blushing at the idea of spending so much time with a stranger and even enjoying it this much. You're right, old man, Jubilee hopped out of her seat, quickly beckoning her new friend up. We got one more stop. Fireworks? Cool. Nazari smirked as he joined his friend on his feet. Thank you, old man, that is the best ramen I've ever had in this world, man, phenomenal. Naruto praised while doing the chef's kiss motion. This world. The chef thought as he smiled at the praise from the young man. As the pair made their way to the New Year fireworks display, they got caught in the crowd and swept up in the parade. The teens witnessed the many dragons marching along with human legs kicking out from underneath, cheering and merry people keeping the party going. The whole time this was going on, Jubilee had grabbed a hold of Nazari's hand and hadn't let go. Nazari just figured it would best not to get separated. Breaking free of the crowds, the duo finally made it to where the main display was to be held. Looks like we made it before it all goes off. Is this normal? The busyness, I mean. The undercover prince asked as his guide turned to face him before answering. I mean, yeah, pretty much, Jubilee replied as the countdown timer began. 10. The crowd counted along with the timer. 9. This time Jubilee joined in. 8. The crowd seemed to settle slightly, but the air was filled with excitement. 7. Nazari was gearing up to join in with the chanting crowd before the hairs all over his body stood on edge. 6. What is this feeling? The former shinobi thought to himself. My senses are in overdrive, something is about to happen. 5. In the span of a single second, everything changed to peace and tranquility, the shared love for the other came to a screeching halt. 4. Reaching out for his companion's shoulder, the prince interrupted her next shout. 3. We need to leave now. Wah. 2. An orange light illuminated the crowd below, catching several people's attention including the unlikely duo. Is that a firework? Should Molotov? Nazari quickly recognized the bottle and flaming rag combination. Tracing back the trajectory, the young teen saw where it came from. Death to all mutants was the war cry that was heard coming from the approaching mob. Eyes widened, but before screams could go off, the lit Molotov smashed into the crowd, igniting the first few people it came into contact with. 1. All hell broke loose as the fireworks display began shooting into the air. Firearms were going off, and the crowd were scrambling for a semblance of safety. Chaos had been unleashed. Shit, it's the purifiers. Time to go, like right now. Jubilee shouted as the crowd began to scatter from the violent mob who were swinging at anything that moved. Nodding along, Nazari just nodded as he began to follow his friend, dashing in between the crowd to avoid getting stuck. The duo ended up running down an alley. As the pair began to make it towards the other side of the alley, a bright light flashed in the teen's face, causing the boy to glance away from the sudden brightness. The girl fell on her backside and skidded across the damp ground as she saw what the torch was attached to. Looks like we got ourselves a couple of muty freaks. The gun-toting man smirked at his partner as he raised his firearm to aim. No, wait. Jubilee cried out as she waved her hands in front of her face. In the stress and panic of the situation, jubilationly awoke. A spectrum of light appeared in the girl's palm, glowing brighter by the second. As the world appeared to slow, it could be said 4 people stood in that alley. The world stood still for another second and then a flash of light. As the world began to turn once more, 3 people stood in that alley. The 3 still standing turned to the fallen gunman, his eyelids seemingly seared closed. Smoke still wafting from his corpse. Ah shit, Freddy. The remaining gunman turned to the girl who had just blasted his partner. You dog-eating mutant cunt, you're gonna pay for that. Now that's just racist. Nazari, as he kept his eyes closed, not wanting to risk being blinded by that high beam his friend could produce, and relied on his other senses. Leaping in front of his downed friend just as the psycho was about to shoot at a child. Bang. 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 No, Nazari. Jubilee shouted in fear. She could see smoke floating in front of her friend. You were about to shoot a child, Naruto said as coldness entered his tone. What Jubilee couldn't see was the bullet stopping short of their target blocked by an invisible wall. The undercover prince leapt into action as soon as the gunman realized the bullets had been stopped. After a couple of seconds of confusion, Nazari sprung like a loaded spring, launching himself knee first, knocking the rifle from the man's hands, before rotating his smaller framed body with back elbow to the nose, making sure to feel cartilage break. Fast. Ominous. The man wildly grasped at his face, his arms flailing around. Taking advantage of swinging free limb, Nazari rotated his body once more, wrapping his hand around the man's wrist, and turned using the man's weight against him, judo throwing the older man over his shoulder. Making sure not to use his full strength when the man was falling to the ground just before his head could make contact with the ground, Nazari beeped his fist back blast away. The former shinobi shouted as he let a left straight fly, clocking the enemy straight in the solar plexus. Following a gasp for air and the release of spittle, the grown man was launched out over Jubilee's head and out of the alley the way the two teens came from. But how? Jubilee stuttered at what she just witnessed as she attempted to stand up, but as she tried to stand up straight, the world turned upside down. "Here we go," Nazari said as he scooped up the girl into his arms. "Looks like you hit your head." That's a lot of blood pouring down her face. Head wounds can be deceiving and must always be checked over. Shinobi rule number 17, and I learned that again here from the general, the prince thought as he couldn't immediately find the source of the bleed. It's got to be in her hair. Shit, okay, I want to help stop this madness, but I can't expose myself. The former Hokage and current prince thought of the consequences of his potential actions before a weak cough snapped him out of his current thought process. Glancing down at his acquaintance who had quickly turned friend. "Jubilee, you still with me, yeah? Ooh, what? Come on, stay awake for me now, yeah? You're in shock, you've hit your head and have lost a lot of blood, we need to get out of here." Nazari quickly shifted the Jubilee up slightly in hopes of waking her up. After taking one deep breath, the prince stepped over the still smoking shell casings from the shots earlier and began to leave the whole area. Stepping out of the alley as they originally intended, Naruto began to sprint back towards his ship as his friend was drifting in and out of consciousness. The prince was moving at full speed, cursing the fact that he hadn't figured out how to teleport with other people yet. Skipping over covered cars on the road, Nazari was picking up speed with every stride, not focusing on anything else, he was just moving. Subconsciously, the former shinobi hopped onto a moving car before leaping further into the distance. Every step accompanied a burst of burgundy-colored energy, propelling the teen even faster. "Focus, don't funk up," Nazari thought while he boosted his speed past superhuman limits. He was simultaneously using infinity to hold Jubilee completely still, so his speed wouldn't rattle her skull at all. The further away from the ruckus, the safer his friend would be. Thankfully, a lifetime and 10 years of training in this life has sharpened the mind of the warrior prince, and as he was heading back to his ship, leaping from lamppost to traffic light and back, just like he was tree running through fire country as a shinobi. "We're almost there," Nazari said as he could see the trees come into sight. It took one more leap and the duo landed in the trees and disappeared. "Stop." A voice rang out. Instantly on edge, Nazari came to a skidding stop. "I didn't hear anything," the prince thought. "My senses, my hearing would have picked that up, but there was nothing that was in my head." "You need to run, the purifiers are approaching you." The same voice from earlier spoke directly into his head. "Purifiers? What is a purifier? Never mind that, who are you? And how are you in my head?" Nazari thought back, hoping for a response. "No time, move now." Looking ahead from his position, he could see men with guns and taser batons sparking in the distance. "Run. Why would I run?" the prince thought as he placed his friend down on the ground. "Don't you go anywhere now, okay?" Nazari spoke softly as he placed his companion against the side of a car. "What are you doing, you idiot? There are too many," the voice cried. "Don't worry, strange lady in my head, I hope you got some good seats wherever you are." Glancing around, his eyes began to emit a bright amber glare. His connection to infinity solidified as space itself became a part of his dominion. "Wh'd walking ab," the voice tried to talk, but something was interfering with the connection. "Down with mutants. Rise up, our fellow purifiers." The chants were getting louder as this new group approached. Nazari stood there completely calm. "Throughout my shinobi career, I didn't have that much of a body count compared to other Kages, but that was then is now." After one last deep exhale, the prince dashed forward. In a single bound, the boy, barely 14 summers old, descended upon a mob of racists. "What the he?" Was all on man dressed in all white said as the sole of a sneaker just an inch from his face before it, the sole stamped down, to which crumpled the man as he immediately lost consciousness. "Oh my god. Did he kill Kenny?" Another one dressed in white, the first to speak from a stunned silence. "I'm Kenny, asshole." That was Greg. But Greg had a family. "Penny, Greg, it doesn't matter, to all I see is fools and dead men." Nazari threatened as his eyes looked almost molten. "Look at his eye, he has got to be one of them." another shouted from within the crowd. And he is a filthy mutant nig, the man shouted before he felt a presence behind him as the man turned right into a back fist that rocked his jaw. Nazari didn't bother to duck as a wild swing was thrown his way, it just stopped short of his face. "Oh, clothes but no cigar," the prince paused. "They do say that in this country, right? It has been a while since I've been on foreign soil. You will pay for that." No, I won't. You stand before royalty," the prince thought before narrowing his gaze. "So, kneel." When one hears such words, you normally have a choice in the matter. This time the whole mob all obeyed. Every single person who surrounded the second son of King Chaka collapsed to the ground from the pressure. Nazari just spoke once and chaos erupted, his hands back in his pockets as his eyes were still emitting light. "It funking worked, yeah boy," Nazari cheered mentally. Bending space on itself without accidentally tearing space apart was hard, but through the folding of space onto itself, I can make anyone bear the weight of an ever-expanding universe. The hidden audience watching and observing the young mutant jaws dropped. "What's that kid doing? That's got to be like 60 plus people, is he telekinetic?" "Oh, stop being such punks, that weight you're all feeling is only 0.5 times our normal gravity." Nazari chuckled as he looked down upon these so-called purifiers. "Let's bump it up a notch, shall we?" Raising his power output slowly, the prince could see the sweat pouring off of these so-called purifiers' forms. 5 Earth's normal gravity, Nazari stated before flexing his power once more. This one flex forced all remaining purifiers who were trying to fight off of their knees against an invisible weight, smashing their heads face first into the tarmac on the road. "Right now, it should feel like your entire body is being crushed, your skeletal system is fracturing under the weight," Nazari spoke with a jovial beepiness. "Now guys, just don't leave or go anywhere, I'll be right back." The prince finished with a clap of his hands right before vanishing from the spot where he stood. What did we just witness? An observer who was watching the incident unfurl. The young prince appeared back by his friend's side. As he leant over to scope her back into his arms, he let go of his power, only maintaining his spatial control over his friend. "Finally, I'm through, are you and your companion okay?" "Ah, you're back, yay," Nazari responded as he rolled his eyes at the returning voice. "Did you just roll your eyes? You know what, never mind, stay where you are, the X-Men are en route to your position." The fog began to roll into the area, putting the prince's instincts on edge, his shinobi and warrior training cranked up to 11, his power on the tips of his fingers ready to burst free, and his hearing was focused and ready. "What is that?" the prince whispered, in response to some kind of roar. "A jet engine, and it's slowing down, right on top of me." Nazari sighed, dropping his head. "Well, I always did love an adventure, didn't I?" he laughed as the jet descended, stopping just above him. The AMF. An explosion of black smoke appeared right in front of the young teenagers. "Why do I smell sulfur?" "Hey man, the name is Nightcrawler, I'm an X-Man, right?" Nazari blinked at the blue-skinned man with pointed ears. "Is that a tail?" "I'm to collect you and Miss Jubilation Lee back on board," Nightcrawler pointed up towards the ship. The prince lightly shifted Jubilee a little bit, making sure she was secure. "Let's get to it, but if you try anything," Nazari said with some edge to the tone, leaving for no room for confusion. The threat was issued and fully understood. The blur-furred humanoid reached forward slowly to not make any sudden movements. Extending his 3-finger hand, he gently took hold of the young teen's shoulder. "I should warn you, once-time teleport can leave you queasy, so my apologies." "I think I'll be okay," Nazari smirked before glancing towards the ship above them. The AMF. Gone were the 3 standing on the street below in a plume of black smoke. Almost an instant later. The AMF. In another cloud of smoke, the 3 from the streets below were back inside the ship above. Glancing around, the prince saw several people scattered about, civilians who looked terrified. Mutants, not just civilians, Nazari thought to himself. "Follow me, we have a doctor checking over the injured." "Whatever you say, Nightcrawler," Nazari playfully teased the codename while walking after the blue teleporter. It took less than a minute to reach the back of the ship, where a makeshift curtain was set in place. But the prince's shinobi brain was hardwired into his soul, written in his very essence. "So, they are the X-Men, interesting outfits. They definitely would blend in with my Wakandan colors, that's for sure," Nazari thought as he glanced at the adult dressed in a bright yellow and blue outfit with the cowl removed, showing off his mutton chops. "He smells like death and cigars, yuck." The prince shook his head before glancing at the older teen with some kind of crimson visor with a blue and gold motif. "Well, he looks kind of boring." Moving on to the next suited up stranger was a girl who was talking to the visor guy, a girl with bright red hair and green eyes, and was rocking a green and gold combat dress and boots. And Uzumaki. Not possible, but still, such a pretty shade of red. As the prince continued to follow the one called Nightcrawler, he did get a chance to look at the piloting of this archaic jet. Well, archaic compared to home, Nazari thought as they had come to a stop at the rear of the plane in front of a black curtain. Probably for privacy, I guess. Heard my boy, you have returned, that was quick. A deep and powerful voice spoke up. I know that voice, the prince muttered as his eyes widened. Least we got a couple of new ones. Nightcrawler waited just before the curtain as another blue-furred humanoid stuck its head out to address the teleporter. Dr. Hank McCoy, I'm a big fan of your work in the field of genetics, Nazari spoke up, excitement entering his tone for the first time since the apparent rescue. Ah, a fan or a fellow geneticist? A bit of both, to be honest. Well, young man, place your friend on the table, and once we get safe we can have a full catch-up. Right, Nazari walked further into the makeshift emergency room and placed Jubilee on the table. Nightcrawler, show Nazari where he can strap in. Right, Nightcrawler nodded before guiding the younger man back the way they came. I need to speak to pilots. We'll see if they ain't too busy, we got 2 more mutants to rescue. Thank you, by the way, it's my first time in the city, I was kind of lost in the chaos. Nazari thanked genuinely as he followed back towards the nose of the plane, where he saw platinum blonde hair and white from the back of their heads. Storm, Frost, our latest guest would like a word if that's alright. Send him over, we're just waiting on the signal from Iceman, Emma responded. Nightcrawler turned and signaled the young teen over as he stepped away. Nazari's eyes widened at the sound of the voice. You were in my head. Naruto spoke as she turned her seat around after removing her headset. She's young, only a year or 2 older than me. Nazari thought as he looked at the young teen with platinum blonde hair, white crop top, some white jeans and white boots. I think she likes white as much as I love orange. How did you do that? Nazari just looked puzzled. How did you block me out? Are you a telepath? The girl questioned. Nah, not a telepath, and I have no idea how, but if blocks people peeping in my head, then note to self, master that later. Told you I was strong, didn't I? Nazari started but lost his train of thought as he saw the other pilot's chair as it turned towards him. Familiar white, sun-kissed black African skin dressed in similar garments as the other X-Men. Nazari's eyes began to glow as his vision focused all of his attention on his lost friend. Emotions threatened to spill, but the prince knew there was a time and place. Aurora. The following day Nazari came out of the shower and popped his joints as he stretched. I'm off balance, shit. Need to stop and plant my feet. Nazari to himself before glancing through the window and sun-touched grass. Making up his mind, the prince opened his window and put on a black vest and a pair of spare basketball shorts before leaping out of the building from the 3rd floor and landing in the middle of green, equal distance between the water feature fountain and the big old tree. Alright, it's too early for anyone to be up, but this should be fine, Nazari muttered to himself as he sat down, crossed his legs and began to meditate as he learned in his last life. There was a lot to process. His first time in another nation, a riot broke out, the X-Men arrived, and his new friend was like him, a mutant. And then there is Aurora, the last 4 years nothing, not a sign of her, but boom, on a random ass night in America, a night with the X-Men, and here she is, and she doesn't remember me, Chala, Shuri or Wakanda for that matter. I need to get to the bottom of this. Look out below. A voice cried out from above, causing the young teen to glance over his shoulder, was one of the normal residents rocketing towards in an out-of-control fashion. That explains all them craters round back. Nazari thought as he sighed. There goes my peaceful meditation, Nazari as he contemplated on what to do next. Dodge or block. If he hits my infinity at that speed, will he go splat? Probably shouldn't risk it. Nazari still did not move even after more cries could heard in the distance for him to move. Clap. A single clap echoed throughout the area. Everything was still in that moment. The bystanders watched on as one of their peers lose control again and crash into the new guy. The human rocket closed his eyes in fear, not seeing space itself warp around himself and his accidental target, and in a blink of an eye the two had swapped positions. Nazari fell a couple of inches off of the ground, but with his panther-like reflexes, he was able to land like he just hopped to his feet. The rocket fortunately was now where Nazari used to be. Unfortunately, he was still an out-of-control rocket, so his powers continued as dug a deep trench in the yard. Ooh, that looked like it hurt. You okay in there? Nazari shouted into the trench-like crater. I'm alive, a hand holding the thumbs came out of the smoke. Sorry about all that, been trying to work on my landings. Welp, I'm going to head inside to get some breakfast. You want some? Sam Gunthry. And nah, I'm going to lay here for a second and come in for a bit, wait for feeling to come back. Bears, see you inside, Sam, and the name is Nazari. The teen said his piece and turned to leave. How did I not hit him? It was like 1 second I'm here and he is there, but then I'm there and he is here. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Inside the mansion, Nazari decided to follow his nose to lead him to where breakfast was being held. Arriving at night sure is different to the day, Nazari thought as he wandered. He noted the beauty of the well-kept mansion as the sun was illuminating the old home, revealing beautifully carved wooden stairwells and architecture. Not as grand as the palace, but similar to the Hokage quarters. Due to his enhanced senses, he found his way to the kitchen dining area where some of kids and adults saved last night were scattered about, whereas the several teens who Nazari had yet to meet along with Aurora, Hank and another man in a wheelchair entered into the room. "Hello everyone," the man in a wheelchair spoke up, addressing the room. "My name is Charles Xavier, this is my school for gifted youngsters, and while I know you all went through a harrowing experience last night, I hope you will find the facilities here to allow you all some comfort as you recover. Now shall we go through some introductions?" Charles asked politely, but his gaze was focused straight on the former shinobi. With the room still silent, the prince sighed. "Well, I guess I should be pretty upfront then, I guess. The name is Nazari, my likes are gardening, meditation, and pushing past my limits. My dislikes are, well, I guess now being bored. There we go, something simple and believable." Nazari thought as he sat down at the table, making sure to lock eyes with Xavier. "Now if you're doing what I think you are doing, I would advise staying out my head any deeper. My apologies, I wasn't here last night, so the team had to rely on a more inexperienced telepath. I must protect my students first. Hey, I get it, you're looking after your people, I'm just warning you for your benefit, my power is more than you could imagine." Snapping back to reality, Nazari realized that most of the room had finished this introduction ceremony. The prince stood up on the last word of the final person. "Now I know everyone has questions, but we can talk later, as for now let us eat and break bread with each other." Nazari spoke loud and clearly. "Still can't remember when my Hokage tone drips in with a royalty spiel, but he was funking hungry and by bast, he was going to eat. The half pint is right, let's eat," the short gruff one spoke up and made for the table. "Half pint? Who are you calling half pint, Gigi?" Nazari questioned with a narrowed gaze, slipping into his original tongue. "Old man. Ha, not bad, kid. Now let's eat." Soon the room filled with a shared joy of sharing a meal. Instead of reliving a painful memory, they were allowed to breathe and ease each other, because while Nazari and Jubilee got off quite lightly, some of the other survivors were not so lucky. "That boy is quite charismatic, isn't he?" Charles thought to himself this time as he watched his kids go and mingle with the newcomers and welcome them all the same. Some time passed and breakfast came to an end, and as everyone filtered out of the room, leaving only 4 people in the room. Logan. Charles. Nazari. Aurora. "Now then, you have questions," Nazari spoke aloud, narrowing his gaze by the tiniest margin towards the telepath before turning towards Aurora. "So do I." "Of course, but how should we begin?" Charles spoke up. "Well, I can truly introduce myself, a reintroduction so to speak." Nazari smiled softly before standing up from his seat. "My name is Nazari. Prince of Wakanda, second son to King Chaka and Queen Ramonda, and you Aurora are not alone, your fellow countryman stands before you." "I'm from Wakanda." "Wait, did he say prince? Wakanda, now that's a name I haven't heard in a while," Logan thought. "Interesting and surprising. It was on the night you were taken that I unlocked my mutation." "Which is what exactly?" "I can't say exactly, it's more of a feeling. Like being connected to everything. Helpful. Don't know what to tell you, I'm a 14-year-old kid and I'm currently studying genetics at an undergraduate level, you peep." Nazari snapped back at the gruff-looking man. "How advanced is this child?" Charles thought to himself before opening his mouth. "We can have Hank draw some blood and we can have a look at your genome, maybe get a better understanding. With your permission, of course. As long as it's destroyed afterwards, I ain't fussed. As royalty there are protocols I must adhere to." The prince spoke with a serious nonchalance, if there ever was a way. "That was just an excuse, but realistically I don't need another me running around, and technology is far more advanced now than it was in my original life." Charles was about to speak but paused for a moment. This what I looked like when having an internal conversation?" Nazari thought back to his times with Kurama. "I miss you, buddy. Now back to you, Aurora." Before I was rudely interrupted. Nazari spoke up, intentionally staring down Logan before returning his gaze towards his friend. "You work with this man?" the prince spoke in his mother tongue. "Yes I do, Logan, he is a teacher here at the school," Aurora responded back in the same language. Logan's and Charles's eyes widened at what they just heard, and Nazari's smirk had turned into a full-blown grin. "What?" Aurora questioned, still in Wakandan. "What language are we speaking in?" But how was I speaking Wakandan?" Aurora started speaking in Wakanda before remembering who else was in the room and switched to English. "How do you know my language if you are not from there? I highly doubt it is taught in most major schools, and you have been gone 4 years, and someone as smart as you maybe could pick up a language that fast, but to be that fluent, that natural, I don't know, doesn't quite seem possible." Nazari finished with a smug look on his face. Oh, and if that is not enough evidence, the next time you are looking at yourself in a mirror, just take a peek inside your mouth. Now where have you been for the last 4 years? Nazari asked as he narrowed his gaze on Charles. Seeing the tension in the air, Roro answered quickly. I only remember the last 3 years. The professor here saved me from an evil telepath known as the Shadow King, who wiped my mind out of spite because I ran away. Is he dead? His body is currently deceased, Charles answered. His body is? What an interesting way to word that. Do I have a family? Nazari did his best to hide the twitch when this inevitable question came up. Yeah, you do. You have a sister. I haven't seen her for a while. She's been on assignment for a couple of years. Ever since you went missing, she threw herself into her work. Your mother is okay, she is still in Wakanda. And my father? Nazari couldn't hide this grimace. He watched as the young woman's eyes widened. Tears fell for a man she could not remember. The sky outside began to change as thunder could be heard rolling in. Flashback start. The capital was burning, everything was on fire. Brother fought against brother, sister against sister. The faith militant broke away. The head priest vowed to Bast that the second prince was a bad omen, that the second son was evil incarnate, all because the priest's daughter went missing the day that Nazari awoke his powers. Standing at the ground floor entrance to the royal palace stood two children, one clearly a teenager, the other a young teenager, if not the boy was close to 13. Chala, we need to end this madness. No more chances. I know, little brother, I'll be the one to put him down. Nazari just stayed silent, only nodding his head in approval at his brother's motivations. He's trying to protect me from killing, Nazari thought, sweet but unneeded. Just try and keep up. Keep up, you're the one with the powers, I expect you to do the heavy lifting. Heavy lifting, funk you, I'm 12 and my back is hurting from the carrying I've been doing today. Nazari cursed at his older brother's teasing. So I got 2 plans. Okay. One, we go in all stealthy like and free our sister and the others. Or 2, we both go in loud through the front door. I vote for plan 3. 3? Yeah, 3, we split up, you do the stealth, I'll walk through the front, it will be a race to the throne room. I will not leave you alone, you know you're their main target. And they won't even lay a scratch on me. Just because I'm young doesn't mean I ain't ready. It's the only way, believe it. The elder twin spoke with such compassion Chala forgot who he was talking to. When did he grow up? Okay brother, we will go with your plan, but any sign of trouble you book it out of there. What that man has done is unforgivable. Take your own advice and hold fast, brother. Nazari offered his fist with a beepy smirk. You're going to go overboard, aren't ya? Chala asked as he too smirked, already knowing the answer, and bumped fists with his younger brother. Fine, just don't blow up my room. No promises. There is going so much to clean up, what a pain, Chala muttered to himself as he decided to head off to the side before glancing at his younger brother already ascending the stairs to the front gate. The two separated once more, Nazari heading up the stairs that lead to the front gate, while Chala snuck around the side looking for a stealthier place to exit. As the second son reached the apex of the stairs, he found the courtyard littered with rebel soldiers of the FML, all armed with sonic weapons. You actually broke into Shuri's vault now, that's very impressive, Nazari commented. Look, it's him. He is stupider than we thought. Mutant scum. Is he really walking through the front door? The arrogance of this panther cub. After hearing the murmurs and the insult sent his way, the former shinobi just smirked. Do you really expect me to sneak into my own house? The prince asked with condensation dripping off of his words. Open fire. Someone shouted as a volley of sonic blasts were shot towards the lone prince did not even move. Ah, you freak. You and your ilk will bring death to Wakanda. The faith will protect us where the panther tribe has failed us. The barrage continued until every rifle was depleted of charge. Hold. The leader of this group called out as they could no longer see the target. Wait for the dust to settle, until then recharge your weapons. We don't win, the Black Panther will arrive. Oh, you're worried for your king but not your prince, that seems a bit funked up if you ask me. The prince's voice called out from within the dust cloud. It can't be, that's impossible. One of the gunmen cried at the voice as a shadowy became more visible, revealing the prince unharmed and unscathed from the sonic wave barrage. You guys had your fun, now we done? Because I got a country to save. Oh, and my sister, can't forget about my bratty little sister. Nazari stated as he began stretching his arm out and a menacing grin plastered over his face. You guys should give up now or I can fold you out here and now. Shoot him. Nazari just sighed as he brought his hands forward and clapped his hands, sending a rippling shockwave throughout the surrounding space, an omnidirectional attack that emanated from his palms. The force of the spatial wave had cleared the courtyard. The former shinobi could tell from the force of the attack that this group of around 17 people were either out cold or dead, but he didn't have time to ponder. He is the reason for all of this chaos. Nazari, as he thought of a man he once called uncle. The young mutant raised his left hand, leveling at the massive gate barring his way. Flashback end. He was killed. It was during the civil war 2 years ago between Wakanda and a terrorist group, the Faithful Militant Liberationists. I can explain all later, but as it Wakandan matter I cannot discuss it here and now, but we will go through it later in greater detail. As for now, I believe you're your friend and Xavier has something to say. Realizing that the two were just speaking another language completely foreign to him, but he detected hints of Xhosa and possibly another language. Probably a sister language to Xhosa or the possibility of a shared ancestry between the native South African and Wakandans. More importantly, I have searched her mind and found nothing even relating to this. Charles thought to himself before focusing back on the two teens. It looks like your friend is coming to the end of her REM cycle and is about to wake, so why don't we head down to the infirmary, run some tests and welcome a newly realized mutant. Nazari's eyes widened as a smile returned to his face at the thought of his first American friend. Let's go see the firecracker, Nazari said before pausing as he felt his bracelet beginning to vibrate. 1 second. The prince raised his arm and tapped one of the beads. Wakandan security code. Why I get this here, unless. Ah funk. The prince cursed as he dropped his arm and looked towards the three others in the room. So, the short story is my mum knows I'm not in my room and I give her approximately 6 to 7 hours before they track me here, so we may need to speed this along. Mr. Big Shot is scared of his mother. Logan half laughed as he teased the younger teenager. It's not me I'm concerned about, Nazari answered coolly before suggesting for them to lead the way to the medbay. Around 5 minutes had passed for the four as they all reached the infirmary where the prince's friend was currently resting. Dyhhh. Nazari burst into the room coming to a skidding stop as he saw his friend on the floor and not in the bed like she was supposed to be. That fracking sucked. Jubilee yelled out as she picked herself off of the cold ground. She fell off the bed, the prince thought to himself before snickering. The sound of snickering drew the girl's attention, causing her to glance up and locked eyes with a weird but cute boy she met yesterday, before glancing at the three others who rushed into the room behind the boy. Good morning to you too, the boy said as he stepped towards Jubilee, and please be careful, can't have you opening up your stitches again. At the mention of stitches, Jubilee reached up to the crown of her head and gingerly searched for the wound. Last night was real. Jubilee thought as she glanced at her palms. I'm a freak and a murderer. Alright Chuck, Aurora, how about we give the kids their space since the prince has some explaining to do, Logan spoke up as he began to head to the exit. The old soldier caught onto the tone coming from the younger girl. Desuyero, Nazari cursed in Japanese. Really, you're going to be like that, I bet, the prank war is on, old man. Prince. Later, I'll explain everything later. Just right now though it's about you. Jubilation just nodded numbly as her memories of the night prior kept flashing through her mind's eye. It doesn't take a mind reader to see what's on your mind. No, you are not a murderer, your powers awoke at a stressful point in your life, and mine was the same. Nazari as he stood by her and put his hand on her shoulder to offer some comfort. Yours? Yeah, mine, the teen smirked. Check this out. The teen boy closed his dark brown eyes and exhaled a deep breath. Only a few moments of silence before the young man opened his eyes, revealing the formerly brown eyes had been replaced with molten amber eyes. Now watch this, the teen said simply as he pointed across the room towards her pink sunglasses on the side. The glasses shot from the desk straight into the teen awaiting palm. I can do a lot more with it, but you're getting an actual demonstration later today. I am? Yup, Nazari said, putting more emphasis on the P, making a popping sound. Now shall we get the staff in so they can talk to you and get some blood from me? Staff? Oh, I mean the X-Men, it was them who got us out of the city. I'm not surprised you don't remember a lot, you had lost a lot of blood by that point. Whilst the teens were having their conversation outside of the infirmary, Logan stood side by side in silence. Logan offered nothing outwardly, but that's why Aurora needed time to process all that had just been told. Hank, can you make your way to the infirmary? We have Nazari, we're going to run some tests. Oh excellent, on my W. Hank began to respond mentally before the sound of static filled Charles's head. Forced to break the connection and shut off his telepathy. Something cut me off from Hank. Could it be? Xavier thought to himself as he rubbed his temple and a headache began to form. Noticing the frown on the telepath's face form, Logan stepped forward, taking his attention off of the student they found a couple of years back. Doc. You doing okay? Logan, oh yes. I'm quite alright, just a slight headache and I've got a feeling whatever that boy's powers disrupt telepathy somehow. How do you mean, like weakens it? No, I'm completely cut off unless I want to cause harm to myself. We can run a few tests once Hank gets down here and those two are finished in there. X-Mansion danger room. Up in the observation deck, several X-Men and students stood looking down at the new guy's powers. Alongside Aurora, Logan, Hank, Xavier, and Jubilation. Xavier observed several more of his students enter the deck. Jean, Emma, Kurt, Scott, Forge and Sam Guthrie, very curious. Welcome everyone, we're about to get started. Now we have no actual idea of his capabilities. Charles spoke as he looked at the latest entrant into this room. Down in the main chamber, the former shinobi stood, his eyes closed and hands raised behind his head, completely relaxed. I probably got around 6 more hours before the family reunion. I wonder how they are gonna react when they see Aurora again. Now Mr. Nazari, are you ready to begin? Xavier's voice came over the speakers. Hit me with your best shot. The prince responded while giving a thumbs up. The loud siren sounded off. Level 1. A single turret popped out of a wall and started firing black rubber balls at high velocity. Nazari quirked an eyebrow at the quaint machine. They are more advanced than what's in our latest security reports. Still, child's play compared to the toys my sister cooks up. Nazari eyed the incoming projectiles ducking underneath the objects before dashing to the side and went to strike the turret before coming to a skidding stop. Can I break stuff here? Try your best short stack, ha. Logan's voice came over the intercom this time. Beepin' fine then to charge with a bill. Nazari stood letting the turret lock its aim on him. As it was just about to fire, the prince activated his powers. His dark brown eyes bled molten amber until there was no more brown, and just as the projectiles were about to make contact. Back up on the observation deck, the audience were shocked at the rubber cannonballs just not moving in front of him. Is he telekinetic? Like me? Jean asked in response to what she was seeing. I dunno, but he is fast for a kid, Scott responded, not expecting much from some 14-year-old mutant. I'm not picking up any psionic energy in that chamber, Hank spoke up as he looked at the screen monitoring the room and the current teenage occupant. Are you sure? Because my telepathy is out again, Emma responded in an annoyed tone. How do you mean? Hank asked. Telepathy isn't working. Both Charles and Jean thought, but one was more surprised than the other. He didn't get shot last night. Jubilation's mind flashed back to the night before, just after she knocked her head. Back in the chamber before the turret could let off another volley, he hopped slightly, grabbed at one of the rubber cannonballs and chucked like a dodgeball towards the turret. As it ripped through the air, the observers could see a faint blue glow before it sped in between the individual cannons before smashing into the actual turret, destroying the machine in a glorious fashion. But the best you got, Nazari shouted as he sat down in the air unmoving. How is he doing that? He is just floating upside down, Jubilation questioned as she looked down through the glass view screen. Still no psionics, but this is fascinating, Hank muttered as he read reports from several different sensors. Alright then kid, try this on for size. Logan said over the intercom as he dialed up the difficulty several notches till the dial entered its 20s. Wait Logan, no. Charles tried to stop the older mutant, but it was too late. Level 25. The 4 older teens all stared at Logan like he had grown second head. Level 25, you got to be kidding me, Kurt spoke up, first surprise written across his blue face. That level takes all 5 of us at our best to clear that level, Jean spoke up, noticing the confusion on the younger 3 teens' faces. Suddenly holographic soldiers began appearing, with holographic hostages, multiple turrets and… Are those giant buzzsaws with flamethrowers attached? Yup. Sweetness. Nazari said with a smirk. The prince's smirk became a full-blown grin, fox-like and wild, allowing his old shinobi instincts to run free. This might be a good time to test that out. Also, note to self, hologram assisted training, might need to see if Shuri's got an idea cooking in her R&D, the prince thought as he eyed every hologram out on the field in front of him. Increasing his power output, his eyes emitting a molten amber light, now the teen took a massive inhale and thought about his targets. Clap. All of the holographic hostages were simultaneously teleported behind the prince's back. Now let's dance, Dadabeo, Nazari said, not noticing his verbal tick from his old life come out. Bouncing on the balls of his feet, the teen mutant closed his eyes and cracked his neck. The holograms trained their guns on him and began firing hard light bullets, but like the rubber cannonballs from level 1, the opening salvo stopped moving short of their target. Come on, be more creative than that. Nazari declared before dashing forward, his feet releasing a pulse red light from his feet, flash stepping to the nearest holographic henchman before slamming his knee through the holographic soldier's face, shattering the hard light construct. It took 9 flashes, and the rest of the holographic soldiers were destroyed. Up in the observation deck, the X-Men looked on in awe. He's fast. Sam shouted in amazement at the speed. And such control. His hand-to-hand is top tier, he's had training, Logan spoke as he watched a kid tear through the holographic combatants. So many styles, he switched between Wing Chun, Silat and Jiu-Jitsu almost seamlessly and threw in a few other styles he had never seen before. Who the hell is this kid? By God, that's his power, but these readings it means, Hank thought, as all of the data he was getting from the chamber below and the bloodwork from earlier, he believed he had an explanation for the boy's mutation. He is strong, Emma thought as she looked on at the cute annoying boy she helped rescue last night. Wait, cute? Where did that come from? Scott stood there speechless as he watched some teenager just dominate a course like it was nothing. Forge just looked on in despair as. Is it warm in here? Jean thought to herself while she was impressed with the teen's performance so far. Something about him was making her feel exceedingly warm, but she couldn't figure out why. While the demonstration was going on, drawing everyone's focus onto the young man, no one saw Jean's left iris transmute into fire briefly before returning to their original shade. Forge was only looking on in despair at his prized state-of-the-art training facility. A facility that was currently being torn apart. The prince back flipped out of the way of the extending flaming buzzsaws before focusing on the same object that tried to saw him in two, pointing his right hand at the joint, and soon after the entire extending arm and blade were covered in a blue hue, and with a flick of his wrist, the whole thing was ripped out of the wall, launched into the near turret, which it promptly ripped through with ease. Now then, that was disappointing. Nazari sighed as he raised both arms around shoulder level. Remember, just like last night, fold the space, never try to force space into a form it doesn't naturally fit, Nazari thought to himself before he focused on all of the remaining turrets and giant saw blades. Crush. Every turret seemingly crushed underneath its own weight, crumbling into uneven orbs. Come on, this can't be everything. Naruto spoke up loud enough to pick up the observation deck as they mostly looked on in shock and awe. It's not over yet, Kid Logan thought to himself as he knew what came next. Here it comes, the kid is done at this point. What do you mean? Emma asked as she glanced at her crush standing next Jean. Just wait and see, Scott answered with a small smile before he turned back to the viewing screen, missing the blush that slowly spread across her face. The now familiar sound rang out, causing the prince to sigh. Really, more holographic soldiers that go smash in one hit? Nazari thought as a shadow grew over his body, blocking out the light. Who switched off the, well, you're a big boy, ain't ya? The prince began to complain as he looked up. He saw a giant sentinel standing over him. I haven't fought one of these in forever. Naruto cheered, though it was a prototype and in a lot worse shape. Clap. The prince had gained some distance from the mech, which stood at an impressive 50 meters tall. Exterminate all mutants. No emotion, I think I should be scared. Look, I'm quaking in my shorts. The holographic sentinel just raised its palm and let loose a laser beam. Nazari's eyes widened as the red laser blew up in his face. The audience watched on. They get lasers, that is awesome, they are like the pacifistas we got. Nazari gushed before looking directly into the dead robot eyes of the sentinel. This hologram is as durable as the real thing, right? As far as the latest model we have met in the field, Logan answered as he noted Charles wheeling his way over to Hank in the console, while the kids were all fixed on the prince, who still had not moved as the sentinel unleashed a salvo of missiles and lasers towards with not even a speck of dirt on his clothes. Great. Now, just to prove a point, I'm going to smash this thing in one move. Nazari looked directly at the observation deck, locking eyes with Emma, Jubilation and Aurora. You're going to get a demonstration later today. Don't worry, I'm the strongest. My powers awoke when you were taken. The three flashed back in their minds to conversations they had held with the teen. Now then, focus on the space held in your palm, Nazari spoke as he cupped his left as space began to distort in his palm. What is that blue light? Aurora spotted a small but bright light appear. Then Sentinel was not sentient, but its code was warning it to not let this being complete what it's doing. So, with the purpose of self-preservation, it focused all of its power into one singular beam and released all remaining missiles. 25%. That is an unholy amount of missiles. Nazari thought. He leapt out of the way of the first missile, while still maintaining control of his technique gathering in his hand. No defense, alright then, looks like I'm betting it all on this. Then again, that is the Uzumaki way. Nazari thought to himself as he dashed forward toward the incoming salvo of missiles. 47%. What is that idiot doing? Emma said as she watched the teen dashing towards the weapons. Dying to win and risking death to win are two completely different things, Aurora said in a trance, still only focused on the mutant below. Huh? I don't know, but I think he said it to me once. 79%. Red flashes filled the arena with each step dashing and weaving in between an almost endless wave of hard light exploding missiles. The air began to screech. You got this, ignore it and focus on the rotation, it's all about control. Nazari thought to himself as he gritted his teeth as the space he was manipulating began to grind together. Sweat began to form on his brow as he struggled with wrangling the technique under his control. Charles, are you seeing what I am? Charles Xavier had no words as he read the readings. After dodging the last two rockets, the prince was already on the move, kicking off of the ground, using his flash step to dash and leap straight at the mechanical titan. 97%. It needs to be smoother than that before I add power to this thing. Good to know, the prince thought, his mind already working on ways to improve the technique as a blue orb formed in his palm, the size of a basketball. He is going for a head-on assault with that little thing. Scott questioned, clearly sour some kid was showing him and his team up. Nah, Nazari is unpredictable when he fights, you have no idea what he is going to do next. Kurt looked at Aurora with concern. I don't remember him, but I feel like I know him. 99%. Nazari's grin was large and wild at the sight before him, the 50-meter-tall mech seemed to have focused all of its power on the chest centerpiece. Is that a unibeam? Come on you automated trash can, that's the best you got. Nazari taunted as he reared his left arm back. 100%. I'm mutant. Did it just narrow its optics at me? Oh, whatever shall I do, Nazari whined with sarcasm dripping off each word. The basketball-sized orb that looked like a typhoon of energy in his palm expanded dramatically. In a past life that would be one giant Rasengan. For this life though, how about blue? Spiral Rebellion, Nazari tried out the name as he swung his arm forward at the gigantic laser beam coming his way. In Jubilation Lee's eyes, this looked like manhwa manga she grew up reading because of her dad. Giant mech, lasers, spiral death balls, this is insane. Jubilation Lee thought as she watched her friend leap towards the laser. You got this? The girl cheered, she whooped and hollered despite knowing her friend couldn't hear her. Nazari met the beam head on, the clash was mighty and bright. The two pushed against each other in a mighty struggle. A struggle that lasted 0.2 seconds. The prince's attack ripped through the laser and used his momentum to drive Nazari's attack straight into the chest of the hologram, which screeched against the sentinel armor before it began to twist and became mangled from the pressure the attack generated. As the prince let go of the technique, what was left of the sentinel was catapulted across the room and landed in a heap. He has enough power to one-shot a sentinel, Ford shouted. Shock and fear came over his face. The others had to agree since they were staring at half a sentinel. He just upped and vaporized the damn thing, not bad kid. Logan praised through the intercom. It's only a pair of legs. That's what's left. Emma looked on shocked but also with a blush as she stared at the teenage Superboy. He wasn't kidding, he is strong. She muttered to herself. Kurt and Scott were hyped by the last clash, but one of the two was concerned with what this kid's powers were. Clap. As soon as the audience registered to clap, the BP Team mutant appeared before them, his spread as he took a boy impish smirk on his face as he took an actor's bow, but with twice the ego. Holy hell, that was so awesome. Sam dove in first. What are your powers and how many do you have? He has 2 mutations. Hank spoke up. From the blood work we can determine 2 mutations. I believe your primary mutation, your body generates dark energy and this energy allows for you to manipulate space itself. And from the readings you were just giving off, your powers would work on space at the atomic level. Space. As in anything in space or like space travel, Kurt muttered. I know about the space part already, but dark energy is unknown energy, we don't what that is, but from sounds of it, what you're telling me is I have power over space and I have almost limitless possibilities and applications from this. Nazari responded to Hank. I can teleport at the clap of my hands, I can increase my speed by rapidly blasting off space, hence the red flashes, I can stop you from moving with a thought and focus. I understand space. What was the secondary mutation, Hank? Logan pushed on. Your body assimilates and adapts. That explains the heart-shaped herb crap. When he woke up, Nazari thought as the memory of having to drink that nasty-ass tonic to purge the herb, but nothing worked. He was a Black Panther in terms of abilities with more upside than his father, but still a 14-year-old boy, and he wasn't the heir. Meaning what exactly? Nazari asked. Meaning how we process food, toxins, drinks. If your body finds it useful, it adjusts your body to gain from it and strengthen your body against things such as toxins or poisons. Damn, that sounds broken. Says the old man with a healing factor. The prince responded with a lot of snarky. And you neuter and spade telepaths. I do. Young man, please can you tell us when you activated your powers? Charles said with authoritarian seriousness. Around 4 years ago, why? A few swipes at the console he was at, the display window shifted to show a power surge that happened 4 years ago. Happy birthday, Nazari, as he thought back to that day when everything changed. Yeah, that's the day. 4 years ago on this date, we sensed you on our system for a brief moment before you vanished, but we managed some readings. And comparing your awakening power output compared to now, it is a difference between a puddle and a lake. Hank took over the explanations. You are what we call an Omega level mutant. Which means your powers potentially have no upper limits. Oh, I could have told you that, but I wonder what it was like connecting to all of space for the first time, must be an amazing thing to remember. The young man grumbled. Now if we are done here you have something of mine. Nazari looked directly at Hank. Ah yes, here you go. Hank smiled and passed the tablet in his hand over to the prince. Taking a second to look over the tablet, spotting a tube containing his blood. Alright, eject. Nazari yanked out the tube and slid it into his pocket. Tack on jubilation, tease Emma, and inform home of Aurora to get a message to her sister and say goodbye and hello to some of these guys. The prince thought to himself as he fully disconnected from his powers, allowing his eyes to return to normal. The powerful mutant stood in the middle of the observation deck. He definitely could be the catalyst, he has the power to justify it. Charles thought to himself as they were giving a live demonstration of what someone could do if they could make space itself their plaything. So where to next? The youngest in the room asked out loud before he was swarmed with questions from the teenagers, including Storm. What do you think, Chuck? Either we've discovered humanity's greatest threat and mutant kind's greatest hope. Charles thought, broadcasting his mind to Hank and Logan only. How do you mean? Mutants born in the Omega range are rare, but to have that power is almost limitless applications. Let's not forget we already have 3 Omega level mutants in this very school, and 2 with the potential to reach that echelon of power, Hank explained. Who? Logan asked just to make sure they were all on the same page. Outside of young Nazari, you have Jean, Aurora and me due to a technicality. Charles paused as he noticed the group of teens leaving the observation deck. The potentials are Bobby Drake and Miss Emma Frost. Technicality? By experience, while I cannot match a Omega level telepath's raw power, I have my ways around defeating them. Sometimes I forget how shrewd you can be, Chuck, Logan thought to himself. And to think everyone other than you hasn't even peaked yet. We're going to be in for a troublesome few years, aren't we? Hank continued. And while they all have world-destructive potential, that young man has the potential to reach heights beyond a world breaker. That level of power is too much. It's only a theory at this point, but he can control space itself at the atomic level. When you see waves of blue, he is amplifying his will over space. When you see flashes of red, he reverses the amplification and space itself launches himself around super speed. He has teleportation, and who knows what else. That boy is only limited by his will and imagination, and let's not forget he is only 14 years of age. What will powers look like in 10 years' time? Hank spoke clearly to get his point across. My instincts go haywire whenever his eyes glow. My instincts tell me to run, to not be anywhere near this monster, and it's only due to my humanity that I stand tall. I get it, fuzzball, if the kid ever went rogue, we would be thoroughly screwed. That's not even taking his secondary mutation. Depending on what stress he puts his body through, he will grow physically stronger. Well then, the answer is simple, gentlemen. We should make a good impression with a potential ally who possibly represents a nation. Charles spoke up, ending the back and forth between his left and right hands. Europe. At the same time in Austria, a woman was tossing and turning in bed, having a nightmare. Dreamscape. Where am I? Irene thought as she looked down at what appeared to be a desert. Looking around, she saw nothing for miles apart from the night sky and the stars that filled it. After what seemed like eternity, something happened. A blast of light filled the woman's vision. Royal reds and vibrant golden light clashed against each, exploding amazing fashion. It's them, the prelude to the Omega War, but that's not supposed to occur yet. Irene asked herself as he watched the 2 Omega-level mutants continue to desolate the area with their powers. Come on, you pathetic ant, you may boast rule over the nation, but what is that compared to an galactic empire? An empire you stole, Vulcan, and I think it's time that I show that even though we are both Omega-level mutants, it is only in name alone that we are equal, for we are not the same. I think it's high time someone shows you that there are levels to this shit. Nazari snarled. Vulcan's eyes narrowed as he began to channel his energy manipulation. I've been trying to shut off his brain ever since we crashed here. Looks like I'm going to have to go loud. Vulcan thought as he charged his palms with pure energy and let loose 2 energy blasts directly at his opponent. Earth will join the Empire, and Wakanda shall burn for your arrogance. The current Shire Emperor roared as he continued to launch his attack. Nazari looked at the incoming beams of energy and sighed as he heard a familiar sound that the prince would never forget. The sound of 1,000 birds chirping loud and frantically. I should have figured you would be here, the prince muttered as he made a simple motion. Clap. Positions were switched. The third member of this battle was in the firing line of Vulcan's energy beams, and the prince was standing in the ditch his former best friend just crawled out of. The third member dropped the electricity from their hands and threw up a psionic shield to block incoming blasts. So, you're trying this again, Kevin? Didn't you learn your lesson last time after I left you buried in Mount Everest? Nazari was insulted as he stared down the newcomer as he blocked dual energy beams until they dissipated. Clap. Vulcan's eyes widened as he heard the clap. Nazari just clasped his hands together after making the clap in a familiar hand seal from his previous life before vanishing, only displacing the air in his wake. Wait, I haven't moved and the parasite is still there. Vulcan thought as he panicked from his position in the sky. Looking around frantically until noticed a shadow block the full moon's light. Above. Vulcan's head snapped up. Oh shit, were the only 2 words Vulcan managed to get out before a heel drop connected with his forehead. Who decided you can stand above me? Nazari questioned as his heel connected with the intended target, catapulting the energy-manipulating mutant rocketing to the earth. Floating above both of his opponents, he glanced over to the latest edition of this battle. The prince landed gently on the ground. Sickly pale skin, sweating, and his eyes are leaking smoke. What are you doing to yourself? I end you once and for all, I will burn you till there's nothing left, and then your powers and your body will be mine. Sounding a lot like Orochimaru, there's Sasuke, Nazari addressed his former friend by his original name. That's not my name, Naruto. I am Proteus. The reincarnation of Sasuke Uchiha's psionic energy exploded in his form. Before the psionic mutant could make a move, Vulcan burst out the sand with a violent explosion and rocketed into the air before landing on the other side of Nazari, trapping the prince in between himself and the parasite. Finally dug yourself out of that dune, the prince snickered before looking left and right. It looks like we got ourselves a free-for-all, Nazari claimed as he began charging his power once more, eyeing both Proteus and Vulcan. Sasuke wants my body, but there's a chance he tries for Vulcan. With any of our bodies, it's a bad day for the planet. The day two gods shall fall. Vulcan declared as he eyed the secondary threat Proteus to the real threat limitless. And I will scatter your ashes to the winds. Brag, Proteus just snarled as his powers began to burn through his current body. I will not be your lesser Naruto. From that snarl laced in psionic energy, the words translated on the air and whined itself. Nazari took a breath. He knew what this was, what this is. He had felt so many times in this life and many more in the life where he was called Naruto Uzumaki. This is war, this is not just some fight to fix a mistake. It's bigger than that, this is a clash of ideals, of what we believe is right. Nazari thought as he faced down his former best friend and the douchebag Summer's brother. The Prince of Wakanda stood between two Omega-level mutants and calmly raised both hands, shaping them into finger guns. The molten amber eyes were emitting a powerful glow. A crimson light began to gather at his fingertips as he aimed each hand at his current enemies. Red reversal. Spatial devastation, the prince thought as he focused on reversing his spatial amplification. It's gonna take a lot more than you two losers to bring me down. The desert shook. Space itself twisted and churned. The surrounding world exploded in a burgundy light. To say Irene Adler woke up in fright would be an understatement. She screamed in fear, sitting upright, waking her partner from her own slumber. Bug, Raven groaned as she slowly sat up. This is getting ridiculous. The shape-shifting mutant reached into the bedside drawer, pulled out a notepad and pen. War is coming, Irene spoke in a trance-like state. Nothing new there. Raven rolled her eyes. Itcher shall stain the earth. Itcher, that's what gods bleed, I think. Be a parasite, tyrant or king. Finally, something to work with, Raven said as she jotted down the details. The catalyst must live if we are to face the coming annihilation. Catalyst? That's a new one. And what annihilation? Raven finished writing down the last line before she looked concerned at her partner, who was still non-responsive. For us to survive the coming apocalypse we require the power of Honored One. Irene thought, but she couldn't speak. Something was wrong. No, what are you? What the hell are you? Irene raged and screamed in her mind as she stared at a monster. The beast had sickly yellow eyes, slit like a snake. A creature bathed in shadows and had froze her from breathing the moment the locked eyes. This thing is pure evil. Kuku, don't be rude now, Irene, the being almost hissed at her. Now then, it seems you're the one. What an interesting Kekai Genkai you have. Kekai Genkai? Oh, my apologies, I mean mutation. What do you want? Me, I want for nothing, for I am everything. What is your purpose then, Irene asked. My purpose is simple, I just want my kids back, and for that I require power from the source. Why do you send me these visions? Kuku, my dear, I am not sending you anything. Your mutation from first glance appears to tap into the source fueling your psionic future sight, but you see you are halting my resurrection with your disruptions. What? The beast spoke no more as darkness seemed to envelope her surroundings. Irene tried to scream, shout, whoop and holler, but nothing worked. Even as the final light died out, Irene thought one thing. Raven, I'm sorry. Irene's world went black, her mind swallowed by darkness. That's not normal. Raven thought as she waved her hand in front of her girlfriend's face. Back over in the States, the undercover prince stayed for another hour before saying his goodbyes to everyone who observed him in action and some of the others who got saved the night before heading to the front. Do you really have to go? I'm staying here, you know. Jubilation said with a sad smile. I know, but as you saw, I've got a real good handle on my powers, and besides, I'll offer you a deal, Nazari said as leaned forward slightly as he spotted his friend's pout. You've seen how strong I am, right? The prince paused at the girl's nod before continuing. Well, how about it when you turn 19? I'll come back and take you with me, and we can have our own adventures if you would like, but you're going need to up your power. If you want to tag along me, I got big plans. The prince spoke with a calm as he ruffled her hair. Hey, get off, I'm older than you, the teen girl swatted his hand away as he laughed. So, what do you say? Deal, and you still got to explain the prince thing. Maybe one day, but not today, and you have my number. I do? Yeah, I put it in your phone so you can always call me whenever Starlight. You giving me another nickname now? What? It just suits you, Jubilee, see ya. Wait. Clap. And with a single clap, the teen vanished from the eyes of the recently awoken mutant, leaving only some slight air displacement behind as evidence that someone stood before the girl. I guess I'll tell you next time, you then. See you, Jubilation thought to herself as she turned around to head back to the school. The young mutant was unaware she had several eyes watching her from the mansion. Nazari reappeared on his ship. Time to go home. Need to message Chala on the way. Nazari spoke to himself as he leapt into the pilot seats and began running through the activation sequence. The prince began fiddling with his Kimoya beads. Contact Chala, Shuri and General Okoye group call. After a couple of moments, Shuri answered first, shortly followed by Okoye and finally Chala. Brother. My prince. Little brother. Sup guys, got a bit of story to weave for you guys. My prince, where are you calling from? From my ship. Now my story. Where is the ship, my prince? In New York. Now before you all panic, I'm alive and great. I snuck away to go to that conference which was cancelled BTW, but I managed to meet the X-Men, ride a team of kick-ass mutant superheroes. Nazari broke down his time so far at a rapid pace. Brother, Chala spoke up over the screen, before you cause the general to implode from high blood pressure, how about we get to the point? Ah fine, ruin my fun, why don't ya? Nazari playfully snipped before turning deadly serious. I found her, I found Aurora. Shuri had tears welling up in her eyes while Okoye remained stone-faced, but small smile graced his face. Chala was infinitely hard to figure out from his expression. Are you sure? The eldest asked. 100. Nazari declared, I'm transmitting all the information as I'm flying home, see y'all in about 6 hours, and we can work something out, it complicated, but mind control is very much a real thing. Shit, Shuri cursed. Language, Chala sternly warned. Now then, father is taking myself and a handful of Dora Milaje to this UN conference in Europe, including the general, so when you get back you will wait for my return so we can make a plan. Right. See y'all soon, Nazari said before ending the call, and seeing as the ship was ready to go, he hit the throttle, blasting off towards the Atlantic. Towards the motherland. Towards his home. Wakanda 5 years later. It's been a long 5 years, the prince sighed as he thought back over when everything truly changed. Leaning back against his headboard, he absent-mindedly bent space and palm to resemble a whirlpool, perfectly stable. The UN conference, father died, Chala became king of Wakanda, Shuri was promoted to head of all things science-related, and I was made heir to the throne. Nazari thought as he reminisced over maintaining his friendships with the X-Men, and they often traded data involving genetics and mutants they came across. Though the offer was made on several occasions, the prince always declined the offer to join the X-Men, but his bonds with Jean, Jubilee, Emma and Sam developed greatly. Even though the last time I saw them, Emma and Jubilee were acting strange. Aurora was a different story altogether. Due to the death of our father, everything else was delayed, and all things related to anything else were placed on hold, but eventually she was able to come and visit on a few occasions and reconnect with her mother, and I found her sister on assignment here in New York City. Which was totally okay, not a problem at all, Nazari thought to himself sarcastically. As it turned out, dear serious Vivi under the name Vivian had brought 2 kids, Nathan and Evan, which Nazari didn't put that little detail in active report, knowing about some ramifications that could be placed on her. And I guess today is the day. Nazari thought as he leapt off his bed to head towards the shower before heading to the throne room. Some time had passed, and in the throne room King Chala, Queen Nakia, the king's mother Ramonda, along with several councilmen and women scattered throughout the hall. Where are your siblings? Ramonda asked her eldest child as he sat on his throne. I don't know, mother, but I do know that the general should be back with Shuri any moment now. As the king finished his sentence and the hall doors opened, and in came Shuri and Okoye. And would you look at that, appropriate dress too. Chala mocked as his sister and general approached. Now just your brother. You know he runs on his own logic. He is a free soul. Chala defended his younger brother. Well, you can be free and still be on time. On time for what, mother? Nazari spoke up from behind his mother, causing her to jump. You little. Sorry, mother, it was too easy. Shush, now let me look at my darling son before he gives his first address to the council, Ramonda said as she began to bepize her son's attire. Shut it, Nakia, I can see you giggling. You shouldn't speak to your queen like that, Shuri chastised her brother playfully. Aha, so funny, funk off dweeb, Nazari hurled an insult with a brotherly heat behind it. Boy, knock it off, the pair of ya, Ramonda warned through a narrow gaze. Nakia and Chala just snickered before Ramonda turned her mother's gaze on the 2 rulers of this great nation. All the while the twins smirked at each other before flipping off their king and queen behind their mother's back. The duo stopped their antics as the throne room doors were swung open. "Mifa?" was shouted before more tribal chants followed. "And now everyone is here. It's really not that big a deal, why are all the clans here?" Nazari asked. "It's not every day the strongest person in the country goes on vacation, let alone my heir. Firstly, I'm only heir till you to make a mini you or mini her, so chop chop time's a wasting I don't need, nor do I want this leash. I've been a leader before, a ruler. Now I cherish my freedom," the prince thought to himself. "Secondly, you know damn well what I'm doing." Yes, little brother, but also it's not like I could stop you even if I wanted to." "Yeah, but it makes our mother happy being all traditional." "The stupid shit we do for family," Nazari muttered. "It's time, you know what to do." "Yeah, I know." Chala looked towards his general, and as soon as they locked eyes he nodded. Okoye nodded in response and slammed her vibranium spear into the ground 3 times, signaling that the proceedings were about to begin. The clan heads all sat at their assigned seats, and the heir stepped out into the middle of the seats before turning to his brother, tilting his head forward like a nod. Chala smiled even though the court began whispering amongst themselves. "Chala has never bowed before anyone, not even father. If he respected you, you would have your sign." Chala understood his brother very well, better than most. "I believe out of our entire family, you are the one who carries the pride of the panther," Chala thought as he looked down at his tall prideful brother, who always refused to bow. "Stand proud, brother, and deliver your proposal before the court, Prince Nazari. This whole thing is troublesome, but time to dance the game of politics. Elders of Wakanda. My queen. My king." The prince addressed as he looked around the room, making to sure lock eyes with every single person in the room. "We in Wakanda have always been resilient, but since we stopped hiding in the shadows, the rest of the world has gotten a lot braver or a lot more stupid." Nazari spoke with a serious tone that most, not even his family, often hear. "France, Russia, the British, and the United States have made several attempts on Wakandan outreach facilities within the last 2 years, 1 year after the world learned about our people." The crowd murmured in response. "Now what I'm proposing is you send me out there. I'm the only person who can all of the outreach centers globally." "But what of Wakanda? You have the Black Panther, I'm the anomaly here." Nazari responded, "If I wasn't born, the Black Panther would protect you. If I had no powers, the Black Panther would protect you," the prince said before breathing in and out. "Humanity is lashing out at those who are different. Mutants, Wakanda, Latveria, Inhumans, hell, it doesn't even matter if we go back through history, being different has always led to persecution, especially for things we cannot control." "He is doing good," Ramonda thought as she looked on with pride. "What are you proposing?" the Jabari leader questioned. "Baku, what a great question. Look, I could be out there fostering better relations for the sake of Wakanda, while also fostering faith in our own mutant community, who we know lost a lot of trust after and during the Civil War." Rumors began to spread across the entire hall. "The prince is right, we have seen what happens with the Avengers. With superheroes, the longer they are active, the more the villains will escalate. It is common knowledge that the second son of Wakanda is a mutant. How long before powerful enemies try to go after him?" Baku spoke up once more. "That's a surprise." Before any more words could be said, someone burst into the throne room. "My king, the science division has discovered urgent." Chala glanced over to Shuri, who shook her head in response. "It's better if I show you the data, look here." The scientist used her Kimoyo beads to send over the relevant data. "Satellites have picked a large UFO heading to Earth at accelerated rate," Shuri read out loud after looking through the report. Quickly reading the coordinates of the position of this UFO, the prince tapped into a subtle part of his mutation. "Okay, not an invasion, what are you?" It took a few more moments before the prince's eyes widened from what he was sensing. "It's an asteroid. This a planetary devastating event. Brother, I can stop it, but I need to go now." This statement drew silence from the room. "Are you sure you can stop it and come home safely?" "Who do you think I am? I got this." "Alright, Prince Nazari, well, you got to stop the asteroid, we shall deliberate your proposal." The prince just nodded before turning towards his family and nodded. "By your leave, elders, Queen Nakia, King Chala," Nazari said while focusing on his mother and sister as he flicked his necklace, causing it to light up a brilliant orange before his body was enveloped in a Black Pantherisk suit minus the helmet before he clasped his hands together and vanished without a sound. "Good luck, brother," the king whispered at a point only his wife, his queen, could hear him. Outside Earth's atmosphere. Just outside of Earth's atmosphere, a huge asteroid, depicted as mutant-kind savior but due to differing ideologies, was currently a battlefield between Homo superior. Arcs of crimson light clashed against another beam that appeared to be a multicolored laser. "Come now, Starlight. Is that the best you got?" a white-haired adult taunted his opponent. "Cyclops, you have got to snap out of it." Starlight as she concentrated against the evolved mutant Magneto is funking with your head. Who cares? With power like this nothing could stop us, can't you see we have the chance to compete with the strongest, to become so strong we have to fear nothing again. Ha! You call this strength? I've seen the strongest and you Scott ain't it? Starlight snapped back. And besides it's all well and good to accept a power-up, but what happens when you don't earn it? Starlight spoke as she cancelled her blast attack, allowing Scott's optic blast to continue unabated. The younger adult sidestepped the crimson blast, quickly shifting her arms behind her and letting loose too many explosions of her power to sling herself forward at get speed. She created her own flash step. Ha, you trying to copy that monster? Cyclops roared before his eyes turned red once again and he launched another optic blast. Wait for it, Starlight thought as she watched as he headed straight for her. Now. An explosion went off in her left hand as it was aimed towards the floor, catapulting her into the air out of the way of the optic blast. You don't know the how. Starlight thought as she lifted her familiar, focused all of her power into her right arm. Please let this work, assigning reasons and responsibilities to strength, the weak tend to do that. The young woman muttered, echoing her best friend's words. Before throwing her arm forward and letting loose a massive energy blast. Before Cyclops could react, he took the blast head-on, knocking the evolved mutant off of his feet. The explosion was so bright even Starlight had to cover her eyes. But Cyclops, he was thrown through several walls and around a dozen or so floors deep. That should have killed me, Scott, as his vision began to blur as he tried to pick himself off the floor. Wait, is that the Ing engine? And why is it on fire? Scott managed to think before his eyes rolled back into his head as he lost consciousness. Back with Starlight before she could catch her breath, alarms began going off. Anti-gravity, chamber disabled. That can't be good. Anti-gravity, engine offline. Oh, funk me sideways, Starlight cursed as she understood what that meant. We're going crash into the planet. Starlight thought in a panic as a familiar face flashed through her mind, offering a beepy smirk that she always reassures her in some way. Emma, do you read me? The photokinetic girl thought, hoping the telepath heard her mental broadcast. Yes, Jubilee, you heard the alarm. You need to get back to the hangar. We need to gather together so we can escape. I'm downloading the Kest app into your Shit, you're cutting out. Also, what about Scott and the others? Jubilee thought in response, hoping to get a reply of any kind. Okay, bad news, Emma has been taken out by someone who can sneak up on a telepath, or the good news is here. Jubilee thought to herself as she looked at the molten rocks begin to cool from a blast. Maybe someone is closer to him than I am. The girl thought as she glanced at the series of molten holes her last energy blast created. Another explosion knocked Jubilee out of her revelry as decided to turn around and hit the dash towards the hangar, where some of her temporary team could be found. Earth upper atmosphere. Appearing into the air underneath the coordinates of this falling asteroid. Nazari glanced from left to right and down. Well, the air is certainly thinner up here, and that's a lot of insects. Were Nazari's first thoughts as he stood still floating in the air. Now about that world-killing asteroid. The prince spoke up as he looked up to see the falling rock getting larger with each second. No, not larger, closer. That is going to start burning as soon as it contacts the ozone layer. It's big too, which means I cannot destroy it unless I fully vaporize it. Funk it, too much hassle, I'll settle for full annihilation. The prince spoke as he began to cup his hands together to begin the steps for his technique. Wait. A familiar voice called out. Jean. The prince paused everything as confusion poured over his face. You need to stop, X-Men are on board, Jubilee is on board. Jean spoke before the connection went dead. How the funk am I hearing you right now? My powers are activated, unless. She bullied her way through, fought through the pain. Change of plan, then save my friends and then annihilate the funking thing. The prince declared as he similarly raised both of his hands to pain once upon a time. The asteroid appeared to begin to be covered in a transparent blue flame. The flame spread but did not cause harm. Sweat began to pour off the prince's head as he had to maintain focus as he controlled half of the space. What is this funking thing? Is it the size of China? The prince shouted as he pumped out even more to stabilize the falling meteor. I can lock it down, but having a fight against Earth's gravity is tough, might have to do some training like this in the future. Boom. 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 Explosions. But from where the meteor is mostly intact. The former shinobi glanced around before he saw a crimson rocket. Sam Nazari thought as he witnessed the crimson human rocket fly right past him and straight up. Is he about to? Yup, that was awesome. The prince smirked as he watched a boy rip into the asteroid, with such force he shook the entire falling rock as he began pushing against the asteroid. Asteroid M. Jubilee was doing her best to navigate the twisting hallways. She had already hit 3 dead ends, but she was pretty certain the door that said hangar bay led to the hangar where she was supposed to meet up. I was supposed to go to the mall with my friends, but no, the X-Men got captured and you have to help out because you want your very royal friend to notice you. Jubilee cursed herself as she entered the hangar door only to find stairs that only led down. Funk all of this. Another explosion rocked the stability of the asteroid, causing the girl to stumble over the railing. Quickly shifting her body weight, she let off several photokinetic explosions to slow her descent and control her landing. Well, that worked out, somehow. Jubilee thought as she glanced around, and after a second or two before she realized she was at the bottom of the stairwell. Nice, the young woman thought as she made a mad dash towards the only door leading towards the hangar. After a couple of minutes, the temporary member of the X-Men burst into the bay where she spotted an unconscious Scott being loaded up onto the X-Jet along with Kurt, Rogue and Kitty, Lance Avers, and Hank. What's the situation? Jubilee said as she ran up to Logan, who was all bloody and torn up from fighting an evolved Sabretooth. Nothing too new has changed, telepathy is down, and this rock is currently going down. I'm pretty sure you can put 2 and 2 together, can't ya, half pint? It's him, do you really think so? Come on kid, have you ever known that guy to break a promise? Logan offered a small smile before changing his demeanor. Hurry up and help the others with loading these guys onto the Blackbird. Emma is helping Aurora with the launching sequence, Boy Scout is unconscious and the same with his brother, make sure they're still restrained. Right? Jubilee nodded and despite the current situation couldn't help but keep a smile off of her face. Earth upper atmosphere. The jet could be seen rocketing out of the asteroid's main landing bay. But the humanoid rockety got the alert, cancelled his thrust and allowed gravity to take hold of him briefly before rocketing over towards Nazari. The prince just nodded as he heard what Sam had said. Finally, Charles is gonna catch some heat for this. Now then, where were we? Nazari said as he let go of holding up the asteroid and held out his left hand as a perfect imitation of a Rasengan formed. Now for stage 2. The prince spoke to himself. He began to drag the very sky into his spatial distortions until a high-pitched screech could be heard by the prince, himself and Sam in the distance. Never used this on an asteroid before, I wonder. Nazari thought as the asteroid began to catch light from officially entering Earth's atmosphere. The prince reared his arm back, took one step forward on the air itself before pivoting and launching the attack forward. Cut through that thing, Fuetin. Rasen Shuriken, big bang impact. Nazari shouted as he watched his orb of death with blades of air cut throughout the air at a fast speed. No faster. Nazari declared as he used his power to amplify the space around the technique. The prince watched on as the flying attack doubled in speed just before slicing into the burning rock. Not yet, Nazari thought as he kept the technique under his control, allowing for his second strongest defensive technique to not detonate too early. I have to make sure none of this survives. The prince waited for 5 more seconds before his technique made it towards the middle. I've always wanted to say this. Katsu. Nazari let go of the controls for his last technique. The wind and spatial distortion based bomb exploded, shredding everything in the blast radius at a cellular level. The air and wind that was combined with the technique expanded outwards, longer confined to the rotating orb of destruction, splitting the asteroid perfectly in half. That's the bang, Nazari commented as he watched the Rasengan portion of his technique glow before also imploding, releasing a typhoon of energy, grinding and shredding the asteroid until dust remained. The sky was illuminated for all to see from a bright turquoise-colored explosion. Some people would claim that saw a second sun be born in the atmosphere. As the explosion died down, the winds were spiraling, churning up the skies as the prince looked on. Okay, maybe the second amp was not needed. Damn, Nazari commented nothing, but ash remained as it scattered in the wind before he looked in the last direction. He saw the Blackbird fly off in. I guess I better catch those guys up, Nazari thought as his body was covered in a red aura. I wonder how fast I can really go, the prince spoke up with a smirk and kicked off the air before rocketing off with his reversed amplification, allowing him to propel himself in the air. Boom. 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 What is that? Kitty Pryde cried as the X-Jet was being rocked by the air pressure caused by the sonic booms. Looks like we got incoming. Logan shouted as he glanced at the motion sensor and watched something other than Sam rocket their way towards their position. After a couple of seconds, what was incoming was already above the X-Jet. Jubilee, since when could the prince fly? Logan called out. Jubilee just looked up and saw her friend coated in an erratic red aura that seemed uncontrolled and wild like static electricity. I didn't know he could, Jubilee gasped as she locked eyes with her best friend. He winked at her as he zipped off. Gone in a red flash, Jubilee thought as she looked away. She missed the orangish blur that sped after Nazari. We need to get out of here pronto. Logan barked from the door as he was keeping watch while the injured got loaded up safely. What's the situation? A familiar voice rang in Logan's ears. Nothing too new has changed, telepathy is down, and this rock is currently going down. I'm pretty sure you can put 2 and 2 together, can't ya, half pint? It's him, do you really think so? Come on kid, have you ever known that guy to break a promise? Logan offered a small smile before changing his demeanor. Hurry up and help the others with loading these guys onto the Blackbird. Boy Scout is unconscious and the same with his brother, make sure they're still restrained. Right. Jubilee nodded and despite the current situation couldn't help but keep a smile off of her face. With the addition of Jubilee, everyone was loaded up onto the ship a lot faster. On board, Kurt and Emma were prepping the jet for takeoff. Emma. Can you do one more sweep to make sure no one else is here? Hank called out as he had just strapped in after he applied a tourniquet to Havoc, who had his arm broken from fighting Kurt and Emma. Telepathy is down, Emma Frost shouted back as she flipped the final couple of switches to engage the engines. Last time I checked, several escape pods were launched and all of our people are in here. Even though with telepath being cut that normally means he's here. Emma thought as a familiar face flashed through her mind. Everyone strap in, it's gonna be a rough one. Kurt shouted as he fixed his headphones over his pointed ears. You heard the elf and the blonde, Logan shouted as he strapped his seatbelt. While Logan knew his healing factor would protect him from a crash landing, it wouldn't help anyone if he was flung into his students. With his adamantium skeleton, he knew it could cause some damage. The jet engines began to ignite, pushing toward the hangar bay. The two pilots glanced at each other. Kurt pushed the throttle to maximum, causing the thrusters to spew orange and blue flames blasting out of asteroid M. Earth upper atmosphere. The X-jet could be seen rocketing out of the asteroid's main landing bay. But the humanoid rocket, he got the alert, cancelled his thrust and allowed gravity to take hold of him briefly before rocketing over towards Nazari. They hit the afterburners, so good luck boss, Sam whispered as he passed by the prince who was still focusing on the asteroid. Like I need luck for this thing. The Prince of Wakanda cancelled his power holding the giant space rocket bay. Nazari began focusing on crafting a typhoon of space in his palm, a near-perfect blue orb created from spatial eddies, before fusing wind into the mix to recreate a turquoise version of his Rasen shuriken. Whilst the Omega-level mutant was focusing on his powers, the asteroid began to enter Earth's atmosphere, which could be seen from the orange aura and embers starting to form along the edges. Yeah, I don't think so, Nazari said as he reared his hand back. The wind being generated from the attack in his palm should have been rustling his hair and clothes, but due to infinity, nothing on his person was being affected by the strong winds. The familiar screech coming from the attack made the prince excited for the result. Finally, I don't have to hold back as much. He thought in excitement before he took a step forward on the very air and pivoted his hips, swung his arm forward and let his technique fly true. What followed was an explosion that lit up the sky. The clouds instantly evaporated from the force of the blast, which was soon followed by a shockwave that almost knocked Sam for a loop and rocked the X-jet, which made all aboard feel like they trying to fly through a level 4 hurricane. What the hell is going on? Kitty Pryde shouted as she clutched onto the arms of her seat as her life depended on it. Logan half laughed aloud. He's just as non-standard as ever. Boo. Rogue asked this time as Kitty looked ready to puke from the shockwave turbulence as it began to die down. Limitless, Jubilee spoke up. Logan's just excited for their yearly brawl, and you will probably meet him soon, barring he doesn't do anything stupid. Boom. 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 Hearing the sound barrier being shattered brought Emma's attention to the sonar. Logan. The young woman shouted before nodding her head to the sonar display. Logan glanced at it from his seat. We got incoming. It only took a few more moments before the incoming was on top of the ship. The X-Men were tense after the battle they just had. They didn't need a fight. They all glanced above to see a man in a black suit with orange accents covered in a crimson light. Jubilee, since when could the prince fly? Logan called out. Jubilee just looked up and saw her friend coated in an erratic red aura that seemed uncontrolled and wild like static electricity. I didn't know he could, Jubilee gasped as she locked eyes with her best friend. He winked at her as he zipped off. Gone in a red flash, Jubilee thought as she looked away. She missed the orangish blur that sped after Nazari. As the X-jet flew after Limitless and Cannonball inside the plane, several of the X-Men were in a discussion about what occurred on this last mission, and for the new members of the team, who was that guy who blew up the entire asteroid? Emma glanced towards the back of the jet and spotted Scott's unconscious form. Oh Scott, she thought with worry. Emma, radio into the mansion. With your telepathy down, we need to contact Charles. Hank spoke up as he realized with Nazari nearby, no telepathy would be able to reach them or we reach out. Unless Jean was using Cerebro, then maybe. Might be an interesting test to conduct when we get back home. Right, yeah, Emma said before turning to face the console and reaching for the radio. This XJ1 come in XM1. The X-jet stayed quiet awaiting a response only to hear silence. XM1 come in this XJ1, do you read? Emma tried again. Avengers Mansion, Manhattan, New York. Inside a laboratory filled with suits of advanced armor stood a man suited up in red and gold armor with a glowing centerpiece looking at a holographic screen displaying the destruction of the asteroid. "Crisis averted, Mr. Stark." A voice spoke over the speakers into the room. "That kind of power is ridiculous, but still." Jarvis ran back the stream about before the energy disk of death was formed, Stark ordered. "And run the playback at half speed." "Ready when you are, sir." "Now firstly beepize that suit our mystery person is wearing." Beepasis completed. The suit is made up of a complex vibranium weave. Typically found within Black Panther's armor. Vibranium? T'Challa has been holding out on us, Stark thought as he ordered Jarvis to continue playing so they could beepize the power displayed. Shield Helicarrier undisclosed location. Alarms were going off across the entire ship, a standard response for an imminent extinction event. "Shut those damn alarms off. And someone show me what the hell happened to that damned asteroid." A bald man with an eye patch ordered his crew. "Fury, sir, over here." The data sent straight from Sword. A woman spoke up from the man's left. As the man walked over to his second in command and stood behind her chair as he glanced down at the video stream from space. The asteroid where the not-so-secret mutant battle was going on had launched several pods that re-entered the atmosphere as the giant rock was being pulled into Earth's atmosphere by her gravitational pull. After a few more seconds, what appeared to be blades of wind sliced the asteroid in half before some kind of blue-greenish core exploded and then nothing. "Where's the rest?" Fury thought to himself. "Maria." Sword guessed that the shockwave destroyed the satellite monitoring the situation. Maria answered back almost instantly, "Here are all of the readings of energy output we got on that." "Hill, am I reading this correctly?" "Sir?" "Tell the eggheads up and Sword to check it again. We're going to run tests off our readings as well." Nick spoke with authority as he stood back and turned to address the crew. "Everybody else, we are on our way to the blast site to see what new threat we could possibly be dealing with. And can someone shut that motherfucking alarm off?" Whatever that was, it sliced through an asteroid turned space station like a hot knife through, but and then blew the funking thing up. Charles better have some funking answers for me. Fury thought to himself as he looked towards Maria Hill. Maria contacts Widow, "I want eyes on Xavier's damn school." "Yes, sir." Hassel Doomstat Latveria. "So that fool failed, expected, but that boy intervened, that is unexpected." A man in a metal mask who sat on a throne in a laboratory as he watched a large mirror made of multiple shards of dark glass floating before him. With a wave of his hand, the man dressed in iron cold metal willed the transmission mirror to display a map of Wakanda. "That boy will need monitoring, maybe some mercenaries will do, but who?" The man thought as a few names flew through his mind. "Wakanda, are you so sure of your power that you allow your greatest weapon to roam so far off its leash?" The arrogance. The man spat before an idea formed. "Wakanda, for your arrogance you shall fall to doom," Doom announced as he went to work plotting his dark deeds. "Xavier's school for the gifted, Westchester, New York." "Why is it so foggy we can't see shit?" Logan said as he stood next to Kurt's peering through the window. "Maybe it's storm," Kurt responded as he flew jet straight back to their home base, "not to mention we lost those two." The jet just couldn't keep up even with the afterburners. As Hank and Emma were working on the radio, they missed twin flashes of orange and red which Kurt and Logan saw through the fog. "Brace yourselves." Logan shouted as he had a feeling what was coming. Boom. Boom. Twin sonic booms tore through the air, sending brief shockwaves that shook the plane once more. "Our ADA is 2 minutes." Kurt spoke loudly so everyone could hear him. And still nothing on the radio. Emma cursed as Beast was currently out of his seat, trying to see if there was anything wrong with the radio on their end. "I'm getting a bad feeling about this," Kurt spoke up as they broke through the fog and clouds and looked down upon their base, their school and home. "Oh my god," Kurt's voice drew everyone's attention to their home. "What the funk?" Logan shouted as he slammed his fist down. "What happened while we were dealing with Magneto?" What everyone was looking at was the east wing of the mansion was just decimated. "It's leveled," Rogue commented while Kitty was just shocked. "What's that?" Jubilee spotted a bright orange explosion in the distance towards the back of the grounds. "Not the priority now," Beast spoke in a serious tone. "Emma, you watch the boys while trying to re-establish communication with someone. Nightcrawler lands us on the basketball court, then assist Shadowcat and Beast with searching for our people. Rogue, you with me and Jubilee and we will check out that explosion." Logan ordered. After they landed and began exiting the jet, Logan sniffed the air and began growling with rage. "Juggernaut." Wolverine followed the scent towards where they were heading. Logan started dashing at top speed in that direction. "Jubilee, come on, we keep on moving if we want to catch him," Rogue said, snapping out whatever thoughts that were going through the younger girl's head. "Right." Over in the distance at the site of the explosion stood 3 men standing in the way of one. "Get out of my way, you sniveling runts," the larger man ordered. Well, this turning into an eventful day, isn't it? Limitless commented flippantly, seemingly ignoring the hulking giant of a man. You do know that he is the Juggernaut, right? Is he? I thought he'd be taller. The prince said to Sam before turning back towards the Juggernaut. I thought you'd be taller. I'm going to squish you flat, punk. Cannonball, don't move, give me like 30 seconds. Yeah, that should be enough time. Nazari said as he began stretching. 30 seconds. You're not serious? That's Kane Marcoaka the Juggernaut. Very serious, I was in the middle of something before this asteroid fiasco, and since I'm in America for a limited time I'm going get myself some Inumaki's ramen, Nazari said in a deadly serious manner as he walked forward stepping in front of his friend. Ramen? Seriously, Jubilee is right, you are Ramen nutjob. Nazari span on his feet now, dramatically facing his friend, pulling an equally stupid pose. Damn straight. I'm always serious about ramen. Hope you're proud of that one, Jiraiya-sensei. Enough of this, shut up and die, Juggernaut roared as he began sprinting at the two dweebs. You think you can disrespect me? He shouted as the behemoth of a man leapt into the air, ready to strike down on the punk-ass weaklings who sneaked him and knocked him away from finishing off his brother. Seeing as Limitless had his back turned to his incoming enemy, Sam's eyes widened. Look out. The blonde-haired mutant shouted as watched Juggernaut slam down on his friend. The impact of the collision knocked up a huge shockwave that knocked Cannonball backwards. Shit. He cursed as he lost his footing and fell onto his back, but thinking quickly he used his momentum to roll backwards too into a standing position. Stable but still skidding backwards, he aims his hands behind him, activates his own powers, and generates thrust to slow himself down to a stop. As the dust cloud settled to figures were still standing, Juggernaut stood in a hunched-over position, his eyes red from rage, his fists buried in the earth. Cannonball then looked upward slightly and let his jaw drop, his brain failing to process the audacity of the prince. Limitless just casually crouching on Juggernaut's upper back, just casually with his foot stepping on the back of Juggernaut's head. Ramen is after all the food of the gods. Now then, Juggernaut, we've got an audience, so I'm going to show off a little. Nazari continued to rant about his favorite food like nothing happened. As he was talking, he moved rapidly, quickly leaping off to the right-hand side slightly before raising his left leg to his chest and unleashing the mother of all kicks to the side of the head, which knocked the Juggernaut for a loop, sending him clattering to the floor. Nazari quickly hopped backwards, getting some distance. 10. Shinobi tactic number 9. Rage fuels great power, but blinds even a steady hand, Nazari thought to himself, even though it was an old proverb from the land of fire monks that Nazari adopted into his own personal guidebook. The meaning rage can be a great tool to use in battle, but be wary, for it may blind even the most steady hand, and as shinobi, we always have a steady hand, our kills must be clean and precise, we are not butchers, we are not bandits, we are professionals. Brah. Juggernaut roared, dragging his right fist through the earth and blasted the rocks towards the black-suited teen weaved in between the debris. Come on, is this the best you can, Juggernaut? I thought maybe you give me a challenge. Make me feel something. Nazari taunted just as his opponent charged towards him once again. Geez, it's like fighting a less annoying Jugo, Nazari thought to himself before clasping his hands together and disappearing, causing Juggernaut to miss his first swing. The prince reappeared behind his current enemy in almost the same instant. 17. Oh, so close, Nazari said in the most patronizing tone he could make, but in that same moment, Juggernaut swung behind him, aiming a backfist towards the teenage bug. You ain't a first teleporter, I thought, brat. Nazari's eyes widened ever so slightly, his smirk still on his face. He ducked underneath the wild swing and leapt forward after the momentum of the swing spun Kane around, leaving him open for the knee to the sternum that sent the larger mutant a step backwards before he ate another boot straight in the mouth that sent Kane stumbling back as the prince pushed off the Juggernaut's face and stuck. The landing. Picking up the dirt from his speed, the short mutant dashed straight towards his opponent, reaching Kane before he could recover his balance. Nazari swung hard and targeted his fist for the sternum once again. Ah, was all that came out of Kane's mouth, along with spittle and some blood which looked like it was about to land on the prince's mask, but the blood and saliva never reached the prince. In the same instant, the Juggernaut was launched back further by the teen's power, further into the forest, the huge body of Juggernaut carving a trench into the earth. 22. Monstrous, sometimes the world spawns monsters, Sam thought to himself, remembering Nazari's own words from a few years ago as he watched a regular threat to the X-Men get handled like a little brother by the older, strong brother. Sometimes I forget how strong this Nazari is, arrogant bastard, even named himself Limitless, but there is no denying the fact is he is the strongest, Cannonball thought to himself. He genuinely believed that his friend, who was a nation prince, if you could believe that, was the strongest person in the world. You funking brat. Kane roared, his rage skyrocketing at the being handled by a child by himself before leaping out of the trench and tearing the trees in his way down. You X-Men are always a pain, no matter how old you punks are. Kane shouted as he raised his huge fists high above his head, aiming to bring them down on the younger mutant, putting all of his weight behind his strike. He reeks of magic, Nazari thought as he didn't move as the giant hands of the Juggernaut smashed down on him. The ground cratered from the force, shooting dust everywhere, obscuring the two once again. Sam heard rustling behind him, causing him to be on edge as he glanced behind, only to sigh in relief as Wolverine, Rouge and Jubilee came out of the forest, but before he could say a word the dust cleared and all could see the crater that Kane Marco stood in as Limitless had not moved, still maintaining his placement in space. The fists of Kane were at least an inch off from actually making contact. Not an X-Man, and that's now 25, 26, 27. Nazari counted as he stepped forward, weaving a wild left haymaker and letting loose a left hand of his own, fly aiming for the sternum that he had already targeted throughout this battle. The need of the sternum was physical strength alone. The big punch that sent the Juggernaut flying into the forest was using the base part of his mutation. But this punch was different. Wisps of blue-tinted energy could be found wafting from the prince's fist as he applied his spatial amplification. 28, 29, 30. Nazari counted down as his fist connected with the Juggernaut's sternum with enough force to stop him in his tracks. It was at the moment of impact that something strange happened that not a single living soul had seen before, not even Nazari himself had witnessed. Space had contorted, twisting and churning, and looked like a black flash was released. The prince then felt something break, which brought a smile to his face. "I'm in the zone," the young prince thought as the Juggernaut had folded over his fist before falling over to the ground unconscious. Nazari turned around and flashed the peace sign to his friends as if it were a Tuesday when Jubilee, Rouge, and Sam all had shocked expressions on their faces. Logan, while not shocked at how he handled Juggernaut, was still impressive to witness that level of power. And in the back of Logan's mind, a whisper sprung forth. Too much power, he's dangerous. So am I, Logan thought back before ignoring wherever that came from. Is he dead? Limitless responded, guessing the question from the nod of the head towards the Juggernaut. No idea. 1 second, Nazari said before kicking the fallen villain onto his back and stamping down on where an intact sternum should be, causing Kane Marco to scream from the pain before passing out again. He is alive for now, Nazari said with a shrug before deactivating his powers and allowing his eye to return to a normal color behind his mask. Telepathy is now up and running. Great, Emma can maybe get through the others, Logan said as turned on his communicator. Blondie, Limitless is all tuckered out, telepathy is back on. I hear you loud and clear. Emma responded in the X-Men's and the former shinobi's mind. How are Red and Aurora doing? Nazari thought back, broadcasting his question before thinking to himself, they looked pretty out of it when we flew by. They are okay, a bit banged up, but okay. Xavier is currently unconscious along with Bobby. Hank has moved everyone to the West Wing Infirmary. Right, we will meet you there, Logan responded before looking towards the unconscious form of Juggernaut. What are we going to do about this guy? Don't guys have the RAFT over here for supervillains and stuff, right? Nazari asked Logan while looking between his friends and the newcomer who he hadn't met yet. She's cute, the prince observed before returning his gaze to his first friend in the States. You're early, Jubilee commented as she stepped towards her friend. And you're an X-Man? Nazari questioned the attire. I was only assisting them during clusterfunk of a mission. Fair enough. I'm guessing you still want to come along then. Nazari said before looking towards the now shorter girl. I got a couple of things to take care of, but as long as your stuff wasn't in the wrecked part of the house, I would say you should get packing, but how about in a couple of days we officially move out? Really? Jubilee asked, not trusting her voice to say more. Really, after we get some raiment, but enough for now, let's head back to the mansion and check on the others. Sam watched on as his crush and friend catch up, completely oblivious to everything else, as Rogue went to stand next to the flyboy of the X-Men. She will see you, you know, Rogue feeling a bit bad for the boy. She had only been with the X-Men for 6 months, and even she could see that the boy was down bad for the girl with the pink shades. I don't know what you're talking about. Sam responded coldly. Sure, you don't, Rogue muttered, but decided to drop it. So how did you two end up fighting this meathead? Oh, it was when Nazari and I were racing back to the mansion. Flashback starts. 2 streams of light could be seen speeding through the skies, one orange and the crimson red. One speeding light was fueled by thermochemical energy. The crimson light was powered by pushing their body, reversing space itself. He really mastered the flying. He only asked me for tips last year and he is already this good. Cannonball thought as he struggled to keep up. They both lost the X-Jet a while back, but they were both having fun being free. As the two approached the mansion back in Westchester, they came across a partially destroyed school. Nazari paused his flight as he surveyed the destruction before him. We were going so fast we couldn't hear the commotion, Nazari thought as he looked down at a portion of the school that had collapsed. Cannonball carried on flying around the school trying to get a different angle and get an idea of what could have caused this. As the two mutants were surveying, they witnessed thunderclouds form over the school. Is that? Both young men thought at the same time as the clouds released a powerful bolt of lightning crashing through roof into the school. Soon after the lightning strike, there were several loud crashes before a large man wearing a domed helmet was thrown out of the school. "DRRR, you ain't going to stop me from getting to my punk brother, bitch." The man cursed as began to make his way back into the school, already shaking off the muscular paralysis from the lightning strike. "Yo Cannonball, let's hit the high-low," Limitless shouted loud enough for the whole school to hear. "Really? You sure that's?" Sam tried to inform Nazari, who that was before he witnessed the red static return as he began to start moving at speed. The domed helmet-wearing giant looked left and right, but he couldn't tell where those voices came from. Until he heard a noise coming from behind. Turning around, saw an orange fireball coming directly his way. "The fireball that the best you got," the man commented as he braced himself to tank the attack. What the human-looking titan missed was the crimson flash flying towards him from behind. It was at that moment that Nazari hit the back of one of the man's tree trunk-like legs, and at the same time, Cannonball barreled straight into the man's protected face, making the assailant lose balance and fall over. "Yeah, I don't think so," Nazari roared as he grabbed a hold of the man's ankle and began swinging the big guy around once, around twice, and after 7 more rotations, before releasing the man, launching him into the forest toward the back of the grounds away from the school. Cannonball just watched as the prince carried on rotating, looking like a Beyblade spinning at full velocity as the man's helmet was launched into a wall before the big man was launched into the same wall and continued to fly towards the forest area towards the back of the grounds. Flashback end. "And then we flew over here and Limitless just handled Juggernaut." "Damn," Rogue said as she looked over to the 6'2" tall teen who looked a few years younger than her now that he removed his helmet as stood in his black tight suit that showed off how muscular he was underneath. Well, Logan is dealing with the Juggernaut, guys. Pick up, you can tell me all about it on our way back," Nazari said as he and Jubilee began walking over to Rogue and Cannonball. "Sam, great job with the high-low, man, that was sweet." Nazari congratulated his friend and soon-to-be squad mate. "Thanks, man, but screw that, how you handled Kane was ridiculous." "Meh, I'm a horrible matchup for him." Nazari shook off the praise before turning towards the young woman he hadn't officially met before. "Hi there, I'm Nazari, and I don't believe we have met before." The prince introduced himself as he offered his hand to the girl with dark brown hair with white-haired bangs. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.